The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. Councilmember Coons, it didn't record your vote for. Thank you. 8 council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you, Tyler. Before we begin with these two items, so the purpose for this study session or special city council meeting, as I called it, I wanted on these two items to discuss LB 840, our tech park and our drainage, have the opportunity for council to ask questions to staff as well as the expert that is here. So I will not be taking public comment during this time. This is mainly for council to ask questions and again, understand and have us discuss as council. So item number 1 will be to discuss the LB 840 quarterly report and LB 840 development projects, including Morningside Business Park and Tech Park. And Lottie, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Lottie Mitchell, Plan Administrator for the LB 840 plan. So tonight I want to give a review of the history of our LB 840 program, as well as highlight our successes, and then talk about the city developments in Morningside Business Park and the Tech Park. Fremont first approved the third of a half-cent sales tax for economic development in 1999. Twice since that time, the Fremont voters have again approved the continuation of that sales tax. That sales tax has proven to be enormously beneficial to the city of Fremont. Over 1,800 new jobs have been created, and over 1,600 jobs have been retained. It has also resulted in nearly $200 million increase to property valuations for projects that have been incentivized by LB 840. And those are the projects that have been completed. Those do not include the projects that have not started or are still in process. So we still have enormous growth to see through the incentive of the LB 840 fund. Turning to page 4 of the LB 840 report, page 4 of 4, gives a summary of some totals for you. So total LB 840 funds invested is $20,793,334, resulting again in over 1,800 jobs created, 1,600 jobs retained. When we look at the assessor's website, it allows you to go back 5 years to see what the assessed value was for those properties, for any property in Dodge County for that matter, but we specifically reviewed properties that have been affected by LB 840. And in 2015, those property valuations were just over $57 million. Today, when you look at those assessed valuations, it's over $254 million. So again, the result in almost $200 million worth of property valuations increased by those projects that have utilized the LB 840 fund. When we look at the job creation, the 1,800 jobs does include Costco and Holstone. Those are anomalies to our LB 840 fund, because traditionally our average amount of jobs created per project is between 18 to 20. So if we strip away LB 840 and Costco, we have still created 451 jobs and retained 379 jobs. That averages out to approximately $13,000 of LB 840 dollars per job. That $13,000 incentive you'll see carried through the reports this evening. The $13,000 per job is an average, but we have ranged anywhere from 5,000 to 50,000 per job. It really just depends on what the project needs, because LB 840 is gap financing. It's not the beginning of the project. It's not the end all be all, but we are the gap financing to make these projects go so that we can create growth and stimulate capital investment and property valuations increasing in our community. So again, the range is from 5,000 to 50,000 per job. I'd like now to go to the Morningside Business Park.
Did you talk about the history though?
Yes, it was approved in 1999 and approved twice since then. And our current plan does expire in 2024. So we'll have to go to the voters prior to that time to seek their approval if they'd like to continue the LB 840, the third of a half-cent sales tax, to see if they would like to continue our LB 840 economic development program. If we switch to Morningside Business Park. The Morningside Business Park is 52 acres, was purchased from the Department of Utilities. On the report on the screen, I don't know if we are sharing screen. Okay, perfect. So the purchase price was $803,471. Infrastructure costs are just over $800,000 for a total LB 840 investment of $1.6 million. Take away the proceeds from the sales of those lots, what we generated back into the LB 840 fund. The total LB 840 cost for the development of Morningside Business Park is just over $800,000. Per acre, that's $15,000. That is right within our range, our average of $13,000 per job for LB 840 incentive, and well within our range of $5,000 to $50,000 of LB 840 per job.
Did you highlight the number of jobs? So I don't think you talked about that, did you?
Thank you, Brian. The Morningside Business Park does consist of 6 businesses. Not all are have done their project yet. Not all are out of the ground yet. But so far, it has created 33 full-time jobs and 8 seasonal or part-time jobs. If you look at the valuations in 2015, $0 in property taxes being collected because the city of Fremont owned that property and we are tax exempt. Fast forward to today's assessed valuations, $6.3 million, resulting in just over $19,000 of property taxes collected for the city of Fremont, just from Morningside Business Park and just from the projects that are out of the ground and operating. We still have Jostine Enterprises that has not developed their lot, as well as Ted Maple still has not developed his lot in the Morningside Business Park. So there is still future growth to come from the Morningside Business Park. We'll switch over to the Tech Park, the newest development from the city. Purchase price, $1.6 million, an investment so far of $579,000. And based off of the bid received for the paving of 29th Street and Lincoln Street, we estimated the cost to pave the entire Tech Park. About 5,000 feet of concrete will need to go into the streets there. So that's at an estimated cost of $3.7 million. So total investment for the Tech Park is just over $5.8 million. Let's take away the deductions there. There's a community development block grant of just over $975,000. We are on track to meet the goals of that grant and will not have to pay back that nearly $1 million because we will have met our job creation goal. City and Dodge County, to reimburse the LB 840 for the 12.5 acres they jointly purchased for the Joint Law Enforcement Center. Those funds come back to LB 840. One half of the street expense for the city and county for Lincoln and 29th at $647,500. And the city's responsible for all intersections and cul-de-sacs within the city. And so an estimated cost of $500,000 there. So total deductions of $2,525,492, leaving the final cost at $3,359,649. We are selling these lots for an average price of $25,000. Tier 1 that started along 29th and Lincoln Avenues were sold in the $20,000 range. Tier 2, which moves east on 29th Street, north and south, are being sold for $25,000 per acre. We will have a Tier 3. That cost will be greater because the cost of infrastructure will be greater than what was originally estimated. When this project started, it was originally planned for just 29th and Lincoln Street to be paved. Because now we are extending that, there will be greater infrastructure costs, and we'll try and recoup some of those costs with the sales price in the Tier 2 and Tier 3. So that leaves an estimated cost per acre of $49,773. Subtract the the average selling price of $25,000 per acre from that 49, we're in the $24,000-$25,000 cost per acre range. Again, within the range that we normally incentivize jobs with LB 840. They're not directly applying to our LB 840 fund, but they are receiving the incentive of the lowered price of the cost of land. And so again, we're within the range between $5,000 and $50,000 for the incentive from LB 840 funds. There is an estimated 145 jobs to be created at this time with the properties that have committed to buying lots in the tech park. There's still 20 to 25 acres remaining to sell. The number of jobs could double or more than double within the tech park, depending on what businesses go in the remaining 20 to 25 acres. So when we break down 145 plus jobs into the final cost of per acre for the LB 840 fund, we are again within the range that we typically incentivize job creation within our LB 840 fund. So the creation of over 1,800 jobs, the retention of 1,600 jobs, property valuation increase of over $200 million. All of that accomplished with 1/3 cent sales tax and just over $20 million. All of that growth, all of that expansion, all of that investment stems from the tiniest of sales tax, 1/3 cent. And we can incentivize those projects and create enormous growth for Fremont. Did we cover everything? I think we hit.
Thank you, Lottie. Council, any questions for Lottie? Councilman Yerger?
You plan on making that presentation available to council on hard copy?
The numbers for the Morningside Business Park and the tech park?
What we just went through. Could you?
Yeah, the quarterly reports in the packet, and then the Morningside and Tech Park, we'll send them to you.
Okay, because the material that we just had on screen wasn't in our packet material.
Right.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions for Lottie?
I hope so, because our next one isn't going to come online for 15 minutes.
Yeah. Lottie, do you want to maybe, if we could, I mean, I know we got this 4 pages of the different,
Yeah.
maybe speak to a few of these projects, and if we could,
Absolutely.
go over some of your maybe highlights or
Yes, so we can talk about some of our most recent projects in the last year or so. 505 Brewing Company has came before you originally in 2019, and that was to renovate the basement of 505 Main Street. They have since came back to you recently in the last couple of months and requested an amendment to their LB 840 request to relocate to 4th and Main Street in the old Diamond Vogel. And I saw recently that they're coming soon. This summer, they are planning to open and have their brewery open. They did keep the same name, 505 Brewing Company. Looks like a really great place to go. It'd be great for stimulating traffic in our downtown area. It'll be a wonderful asset to our downtown community. Their incentive was $165,000 for 5 jobs for that project. And they are on track to meet their goal, to meet that. If we look at Holstone Farms, they received $1.3 million for the creation of 600 jobs and the retention of 1,300 jobs. Holstone is a huge partner and huge part of our community, formerly Hormel. If you have driven by their property anytime recently, you can see tons of activity happening there, and they are on track to meet their incentive benchmarks as well. Summit Medical Staffing came to Fremont, started with a rental property on Bell Street, quickly outgrew that, came back to us and said, hey, we'd like to purchase a lot in the tech park. And they are, and that has been through council. You have seen their project. They have closed now and will be breaking ground as soon as they can. And their incentive is to create 55 jobs for a total of $450,000 worth of incentive. And again, they're on track. And they are the company that will help us meet our community development block grant goal of creating 31 jobs for the $1 million incentive to help purchase the property at the tech park. So we can see how all of our incentive programs intertwine and bring benefit to Fremont.
And remember, Summit's on here twice because we replaced the first one with the second loan.
That's
And
right.
So you can't double dip here. So it's now captured in that second to the last line there. On
Yeah,
that
they're
amount.
on here twice. You'll see a $50,000 incentive and a $450,000 incentive. And we forgave the remainder of the first one because they have agreed to commit to those jobs at the tech park to meet the grant requirements. Tech Partners building another building out at their facility, creation of 2 jobs. Their incentive was $32,250. Fabrication Holdings, which is formerly known as Pete's Custom Metal, relocated to the west side of town to the old John Deere implement, agreed to annex so we can continue collecting sales tax. I mean, it's continued their benefit that they provide to Fremont. Their requirement is to create 4 new jobs there. And their incentive was $200,000. Again, on track. Annexation is complete. Jobs, I think he spoke to him just the other day, and they are at 6 jobs created. So they've already passed their required amount and on track to create additional jobs there. And then 505 Main Street Group, that is the group that is going to be renovating the 505 building, 505 North Main Street, converting floors 2 through 5 to studio and 1-bedroom apartments. They're working to get the final details ironed out and then should be starting construction here anytime. That incentive, we agreed to stair step their incentive out. They have to show and submit construction draws so that we can see that progress is being made prior to our LB 840 funds being injected into the project. You'll see Compound Holdings on your report. Compound Holdings is actually on the agenda for tonight. They when we first made their award, they announced that they were approached from another investment firm and that their name could be changing. Well, that has come to fruition and their name will be changing to Vertical Cold Storage. So tonight you'll be seeing their request to amend the resolution to change the name of the LB 840 award to their new company name. But they will be creating 51 jobs. Their incentive was $500,000 and their investment has gone from 50 million to 85 million. So huge change, huge benefit for Fremont. Their annexation is complete. We just got word today that they closed on the sale of the property. And so everything is moving forward there and trending in the right path to meet their requirements as well. Currently, we do not have any uncommitted funds available, but we did have 4 new calls in the last 2 weeks to talk about our incentive program. And while we don't have any uncommitted funds available today, revenue is constantly streaming in. You know, we could balance that on a monthly basis. And so we don't ever say, no, we don't have anything for you. If there is a company interested, we encourage the conversation. We encourage folks to come and talk to us, learn about our program, get everything in order. So when there is funding available, we can, assist them with their project and their gap financing needs to make those projects go.
Thank you, Lottie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But the LB 840 program is a huge success. Huge success, because if you go back and you look at the numbers that Lottie talked about, look at $254 million in assessed valuation. That's huge. we calculated just the tax alone on that. It was
We did-
12,000 a year, I think. The city would collect on that, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think it's
Yeah.
12,000 a year. That's just one part of the story. Now look down through there and calculate how many sales tax dollars these companies bring back into Fremont. We don't know that number because we don't get the reports from the state, but that number is big. And then look at the jobs that they brought and consider, like the city, possibly 50% of the jobs are here in town. Still look at those kind of numbers where the jobs retained 1,600, the new jobs created 1,800 jobs. Look at the 900 new jobs here in Fremont. Look at the values that they're going to invest in this community with either new homes or building, renting, whatever they do, the shopping that they're bringing to town. LB 840 is a huge success. And I really believe the voters saw that the last 2 times they renewed it. So when we talk about the effect of our programs on taxpayers, we should keep in mind, those taxpayers have already voted to approve it once, voted to approve it, renew it twice. 3 times the voters had told us this LB 840 program is a really good program because what it does to Fremont. And hopefully, and you can start sharing this report, it speaks for itself. Look at the success that we're able to do. And that translates into the business parks that we've been doing. It started at the Nelson Business Park. And remember that's when Eagle Distributing came, Fremont Contract Carriers came. That was the first time the city actually invested in real estate, and we sold those lots. I mean, we didn't go back and investigate because that's way back when, what those costs were. But we sat on that last lot until here recently when
DPA.
Del
Yeah.
Peterson bought that last lot. So we're done with that park now. The second project we did was the Morningside Business Park. And initially the utility bought that whole strip of land right there and was going to either do it for a new power plant or do something. And right before I came, Daryl and Dale talked about, hey, listen, let's start developing that property along Morningside. I think those lots would be well received, and they were. I think the mistake that we probably made is that those were too big of lots. They were about 4.5 acres.
4 to 7 acres per
4 to
lot.
7 acres.
Mhm.
And they sold, but if you look at the developments that are there, they're not using all that property. And so when we looked at the tech park, remember, that was anticipated to be primarily one large building. When Yahoo was looking for a data center, right? It was going to be comprised pretty much of one building. We chased that path. That's why we got the $1 million from the state, because they wanted us to go after, at that time, these big data centers. Okay. We really hadn't planned on breaking it up. Well, then when we were second, we didn't get the Yahoo project. We were second. And we started getting towards the end of when the state said, because I think it was initially
April of 2020 was our original
April
deadline.
2020. And so in 2000, late 18 or 19, we met with the state and said, hey, listen, a data center is just not in the cards. That was about the time Facebook announced that they were building these mega data centers in Omaha, in the outskirts. And we just said, we're just not going to get a data center. What if we would change and break it up into lots? What if we would turn it into a business park? And the states come, and we also asked for an extension.
Right.
Because we said, listen, we're obviously not going to meet the deadline. If you want your money back, we've always had it in the LB 840 program. And the state basically said this: we don't want the money back. What we want to help you create the jobs in Fremont. That's what we're interested in. And so if you've got to turn it into a business park, then go right ahead and do it. And about that time, that's when we first hired Olson. That was in 13. Well, I was back in 13. They had a conceptual thing, but then right after in 19, we hired them to kind of take a look at what we had to do anything different. And we really didn't have to do much different, because at the time we thought what they had plotted out what seemed to look pretty good. And that's when we had estimated infrastructure costs. They were going to plat out kind of the western side of that, kind of where 29th and Lincoln, kind of turns right there. And we thought we were going to lot out that whole west side. And we listed it, I think, with two different real estate companies.
Mhm.
We listed it. Cressa was one. I don't remember if it was NP Dodge. I'm not sure who the other one was, but we listed it with 2 real estate companies. And I think the price tag on it was 50,000 or
58,000.
58,000, and we got nothing. I mean, not nibbles, nothing, not a thing. Just, it was too expensive. And so after the state gave us 2 years, because now we're extended until April of 22.
Correct.
We come down to, we're getting close again. What are we going to do to stimulate this? We certainly don't want to give the money back to the state.
And
That
be
would be a
stuck with an
crime
empty
shame.
tech park.
And what?
And be stuck with an empty tech park.
And still be stuck with empty tech park because
Yeah.
nothing was happening. And so that's when Mayor Gessman and I started talking about maybe we should get some development going in that park. And so we had some estimated costs. We did the math, and after that, or before we talked about that, that's when we sold 12.5 acres to the county. So that's where we decided maybe to put the joint law enforcement. And so that helped. Unfortunately, when we did that, there was no new jobs created. Because remember, we would just simply combine operations. And so it didn't satisfy the job requirement that the state had put upon us. So that didn't qualify. So what are we going to do? So we started talking with some folks, and Seth McGinn was the first one. They came knocking and said, hey, listen, I've outgrown my space on West Military. I'd like 4 lots, because he kind of looked at the configuration of like 4 lots. And what's your price? And so we set it fairly low and said, somebody needs to kick this off. Somebody needs to get this development going because we're running out of time. We're tired of sitting there. We're tired. We don't want to pay the money back. And so Seth, as you know, is the first one that approved it. Well, then lo and behold, did we find out, that's when we discovered that was the only business park zoning in the entire city. And it's the only one that's got a floor ratio of 30%. I think technically it's 31%, right, Jennifer? 31.
The business park is 0.314.
0.314, so 31.4%. Only place in town that's a business park, the only one that's got that low floor ratio. And so, and at the time, Seth didn't tell us how big a building he was planning on building. Only after the fact did we find that out. It's like, I'm going to build 120,000 square foot warehouse, headquarters warehouse. We did the math and it's like, that's not going to work. That exceeds the 31%. So he said, okay, so that's when we started working. Is 31% really realistic? The old code was 60%. Is it really realistic? And we said, no. And so we met with Seth and he said, I'll tell you what, I'll buy 2 more lots. If you guys, will work on trying to raise that to 41%. I can make it work on 6, almost 7 acres. All right. So that's when we started the process of coming to change that floor ratio. In the meantime, we started getting comments and other folks. And tonight, a lot of the folks that are in the room here tonight saying, hey, listen, at 50,000, I can't afford this. I'm not going to expand my business in Fremont for $50,000 an acre. You heard from somebody said, I can go to Valley, I can get a lot down there for 20, 25,000. I don't have to stay in Fremont. If I want to expand, I can go somewhere else. And so we said, no, we're going to sell them 20,000 until we see if we stimulate some sales, and then we'll see what happens. And so tonight, I'm really happy with the results, and the folks, a lot of them are sitting in this room saying, hey, listen, we want to invest in Fremont. We want to stay here. We want to keep the jobs here in Fremont. And I get the fact that there may be a slight subsidy, but we're not likely to come to you for LB 840 funds because we either got existing, we're not adding that many. It's going to take years. So we're not going to double dip. We want it now in the lot price, not necessarily in LB 840 funds. Okay. And so I think, and to recap, I think this has been a wise investment, not only like Morningside. I think that was a wise investment to keep businesses there, but I believe this tech park has been a wise decision. And now as we get in calls, and I got 3 more calls, I got 3 more folks interested in lots, we're telling them, and you saw the last tranche is 25,000. So Allo, well, it's actually Total Fire, Allo, Boulevard Boys, Benders, and Cleary were 25. The next calls we're getting, we're saying is 30,000. And our point is we're going to try to average, when we're all done, $25,000 an acre. That's the point. We're trying to average, because at a minimum, like Boulevard Boys, they're going to add 2 jobs. If you take the average investment that we have in a job in an LB 840 is 13,000. So that's 26,000. You had 26,000. You've more than subsidized with those two jobs, the full lot price of what it should be, the $50,000. That's a worth investment. Because if you're going to give it, if you're not going to give them to them a lot, then you better be giving them an LB 840 funds. Because on average, you pay $13,000 per job, on average. Okay, I think Glenn's two projects, one was $20,000 a job and one was $33,000 a job. So you can see we have a range of, Lottie said, between
$5,000 and $50,000.
$5,000 and $50,000 a job. And I think this $13,000 on average is a good average to apply. So when we talk to those folks, listen, if we'll subsidize this upfront cost, you put two jobs in there and now you're broke even. You put more jobs in there and it's benefiting Fremont. And you can certainly see with the LB 840 funds, that's exactly what's happened. We've
there-
got 1,800 jobs in the 49 projects. What's that in average per job or per project? It's a lot.
And these are the people that are coming to the tech park are existing Fremont businesses. These are businesses that are here already and they're growing here. They chose to stay here and grow here, which then frees up the facilities that they're currently in for new businesses or other existing businesses to grow into their facilities and then trickle on down for more businesses to come to Fremont.
Yeah.
It just creates the domino effect
Right.
of
Yeah, if you look down that list, Summit is new. They are existing. They're an existing business. Molly and TJ Bird, of course. Weimer's is existing. Pearl's existing. Lavenders is new. He's
Right.
putting in body shops. Grand Island, 5-6 different communities. He would be new. McGinn's existing. Total Fire, you guys are pretty much existing. Okay, you're not going anywhere. Allo would be new. But again, they're making major investments in Fremont with fiber optics. And so we say they're new, but they're really not. They're coming to Fremont anyway. And they could put an office anywhere and they chose to do one in the business park because they can put a warehouse and they can keep their crews there. Plus they can do retail all on the same site. So it works out great for them. Boulevard Boys, those guys, Tyler's here. Those guys are local. Benders are here. They're local. They're going to do daycare plus construction. And then Clary Landscaping, they're, I think, in Scribner, I believe, right? And so they're moving their business to Fremont, but most of these are local businesses. And I think this tech park fits very well with what everybody is trying to do in there. And I think it's going to be a really good development and spur a lot of jobs. And so hopefully what you've seen tonight explains exactly what we're doing, why we're doing it. And it's no different than what we have done from the beginning with LB 840 funds.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll just add, I mean, the voters of Fremont, they tasked us in this body to, with LB 840. So it says right here, create new jobs, expand the labor market, retain existing jobs, attract new capital investment, broaden the tax base. So, for those 3 times they renewed, that has been our task
correct.
to use that money wisely and create that investment into Fremont by the voters, right?
Yes.
So when you look at the end of where we're at now, the 1,600 jobs, over $200 million of property value increase.
Yep.
Correct.
Correct.
We're doing the best we can to accomplish that. And that's due to Lottie, it's due to staff, taking those calls, working with them, going through the application process. There's 2 committees that they have to go through that vet all of these projects before it even gets to council. And so not only are these projects vetted by the time they get here by those 2 committees, we continue to see interest in that. And so I know I mentioned before getting the word out, especially to no matter if you're a growing business in town or you're coming from out of town about the fund. Our job is to create that capital investment and create those jobs by the voters. That's our task. And so when you look at the tech park and what's going on out there, and you look at the existing Fremont businesses that didn't decide to move out of town, but they saw that we can, stay in town and grow. And with Summit Medical and Can Cooker and Total Fire and Pearl Academy, and a lot of you are here today. That is accomplishing the mission of LB 840 as well, is to maintain and keep those jobs in Fremont, but help them grow. And so, I just want to thank Lottie and staff for working with these different organizations and coming from where we were 10 years ago. I came in here December 8th. This was, a lot of this happened before I was here, but what was already in motion, we had Simply Strong sitting out there is all we had. And now we're basically over half of the lots are committed or sold, and we're hoping to sell it all. And so anyway, thank you very much. Great presentation. Is there any other comments from council before we go to the next part of the study session? Very good. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item would be the item 2. Review updated Tech Park drainage study. This would be Brad Marshall, Olson Engineering. Is Brad available? Brad, if you're available, go ahead.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Maybe a thumbs up.
It's a little, try again, Brad.
Okay, I shifted some papers. Hopefully it's closer to the microphone now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Well, now you can see my face as well. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, council members, mayor. I've been helping with this project for probably its inception, back when Olson was started with this project in, I think, 2013 when we started talking about it. So very excited personally to kind of be here and see and continue to see development happen in Fremont and see a parcel like this develop. These are kind of exciting days. A lot of activity going on and very excited to help everybody here. So we've helped with the final platting, the preliminary platting of the parcels. My primary focus tonight is going to be more about the drainage study and what is associated with the property and updating what was done previously to what we are today and explain it to everybody. So I won't get into very heavy technical details of anything, but I'll start with the property and hopefully I can use Zoom here to its fullest capacity and share my screen. Is that okay? Brian, it looked like you said something, but you're on mute. Okay.
You got it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the subject property, as we well know, the tech park. This is something that was basically an agricultural use. And so when you go through the report, it's pre-development, kind of updated everything from existing when we originally looked at this parcel. So pre-development conditions, we look at the conditions that that property is in, what its uses are, its runoff, and so forth. So really, this was, like I said, agricultural property, row cropped, and the property was really divided into. So east-west, you can kind of see the line right down the middle. I'm going to kind of roughly highlight that line. It divided that property roughly 50-50. Half of it went to the north, half of it went to the south, and basically went into a drainage channel on the north and then into Rawhide on the south side of the property. So it sheet flowed off. It's pre-development. There's no concrete or anything like that. It's not getting carried into pipes. So it basically just found the lowest point and ran off into the channels and was carried away from the properties. So fast forward into a developed condition when we look for a drainage study, what that looks like. So first you take in consideration of the uses in the development of what that, you're going to put in streets, you're going to put in utilities, you're going to put in storm sewer pipes, you're going to parcel those off, subdivide them, and put them into different parcels, and then those are to be used and developed for different purposes. You'll have buildings, you'll have parking lots, you'll have some open spaces. I'll talk to you about a little bit of that. And each use is a little unique. I kind of caught the tail end of Brian's particular users that are proposed into this park. And when comparing that to what the anticipated uses were going to be for the property, all of these fit very well. So at Tech Park, we knew it was going to be buildings, parking, and the uses aren't entirely originally, go back to 2013, weren't going to be all of one thing per se. But now you look at it and you say, okay, I've got some daycares, I've got a little retail, I got a communication centers, an ALLO wanting to be here. We have recreational facilities, we've got warehousing, some contractors want to utilize the space for building storage, outdoor storage, and each use is going to have parking and pavement associated. So when you kind of fast forward and you look into the developed condition, you go, okay, what is this going to look like when it is all buildings and you have parking lots associated with it, you have streets and you have all of that put together. So that increases your runoff, right? And so it rains and it just doesn't go through the farm fields anymore, and it collects into certain locations and it's got to be discharged. So back in 2000, well, I think we actually had an update in 2015-ish about that time. And we got a little bit more detailed in the drainage. And we said, well, okay, so we're going to have these runoff locations and we need to collect those. So you're going to have your pre and post, and you need to basically collect it and make sure you're not increasing runoff from the overall development property. So Olson had developed a plan that is kind of shown here, and I've tried to use some red arrows to kind of show where those drainage paths are being located. And instead of that line that kind of divided that property in half, now you kind of are able to contour the land with grading of each lot and so forth, and push that drainage one way or the other. So that line and that line of separation starts to change a little bit. And so we start looking at, okay, we want to make sure that we don't push too much drainage off to the north. We don't push too much to the south. And if we are, let's make sure that we're going to collect that into a system and hold it. And the way that we do that, retention ponds. And so what I'm going to show you here is relatively the locations. We tried to maintain about the same location. So we had that north drainage ditch, and what I just kind of slowly shown there in blue and just miraculously disappeared was the location that we're going to have a little channel there. So it's still going to go to the north. It's going to get collected and still run over and through a drainage channel. So of particular interest, when you look at this, when we developed this drainage study, we said, well, we've got to develop a detention basin. And so the primary location of this detention basin was along the eastern edge of the property. And I'm highlighting that blue now. So you still are able to collect it in that drainage ditch along the north, and these properties are able to collect and send that drainage to that detention cell. So we allotted basically about 100 feet wide, maybe top to top of that detention cell, and that then collects that drainage and holds it. And then you put a pipe in so that you can restrict the flows coming out of it. And so then over a period of time, instead of all of that runoff, instead of you have this huge storm come through you have 5 inches of rain. And instead of it, all of it just kind of running off and into the creeks and so forth. And like I said, the developed condition is going off the pavements faster and so forth. So it gets thrown into the detention, it gets collected, and it slowly releases from there over hours and hours, particularly between 24 and 36 hours of time. So that's the way we are able to slow down that drainage running off the particular properties. So when we got engaged here again to kind of update the study and make sure that, okay, we've got these uses and what these look like, these are very similar from the perspective of how much impervious area each particular lot may have. Again, parking lots and buildings and so forth. And so as I look through this, the post-development runoffs, we are anticipating, we use curve numbers for really how much runoff is anticipated for each property. You can see these curve numbers that I'm highlighting blue, CN 94, CN 95. The higher the number, the more runoff from the property. So pre-development, for instance, the pre-development of the runoff numbers, I turn my pages, excuse me, we're at an 85. And so an 85 for row crops, your it takes into your soils and consideration as well. Not a lot of soils in this particular area are really going to infiltrate really fast in the ground, clay soils and so forth. It will run off of that property instead of infiltrate. And so again, going up for like commercial, retail, industrial uses, those curve numbers are shown here as 94 or 95. And so that increases the speed, again, of how much runoff is actually taken of these properties, and kind of take that into something that everyone can take into consideration. You back that off into like what and kind of impervious area is actually used on this. And you're generally probably somewhere in the 80, and actually the report says 83% for post-development. And so that's saying 83% of your property is going to be building parking lot that have impervious areas. What are the rest of the areas then? So you take in consideration landscape buffers, natural buffers around the property, setback requirements. And so that really contributes for the other 17% for these developed properties. So a couple of things that I'll point out that we also made a recommendation in the final plat. Like I said, you have the detention along the eastern edge. That's about 100 foot wide and as long as the property is north and south. Also along Rawhide Creek, we took into consideration the Rawhide is a mapped floodplain. It's not associated with elevation, but it is a flood zone A. So it does show up on maps. And so we did recommend an additional buffer of about 30 feet from that property line. That would remove any type of floodplain from particular development property, which is probably good for the city's insurance rates and insurance program for flood control in the city. So that's kind of the very high level mark of everything I've done here and the update that we've gone through. I feel overall that we've the development as it's coming to and being parceled off is very much in character to our original study. But I did include it, and I included a couple of uses and use tables of what particular commercial and industrial and recreational type of facilities may be expected in something like this. So this time I would be happy to take any type of questions from anybody.
About, I know we talked on the phone about, our proposal to increase the floor area ratio from 31% to 41%, and whether you took that into consideration with the drainage study.
I did. Yeah, we did look at that. And as I talked to you about what type of requirements the city still has, we talked about setbacks, we talked about landscape buffers, and then some of those other things that the city is going to maintain from the perspective of, we're going to have a detention, open space, green space. We're going to have a buffer along Rawhide Creek. And so that 83%, I basically did some rough math on a particular parcel, and let's say it's warehouse, or use more intensive use, if you will, like an industrial contractor may have some outside storage and have some parking, got a building. So that's quite a bit of impervious space. But you take in some of those site constraints that is there, and you actually are only able to fill that property roughly around 81%. That again includes, sidewalks, even anything that's really going to make that property more impervious. So with the FAR increases that we talked about, Brian, I felt like it was still that that percentage was still within the guidelines of what we're showing and recommending for the runoff for this for the tech park.
Any questions for Brad? Councilman Yerger?
Well, I'd like to start with this one. It looks like with the map that you had up, your inputs that you had listed in section A appeared to have two directions of flow, one to the north ditch and then one on the south that goes directly into the Rawhide. And from what you were explaining, at least visually, the modeling that's inherent, and I don't know about all the statistics, but the modeling would show that on that north side, you're putting that into some sort of drainage or collection area on the east side of the property. And you described that as being 100-foot wide by the length of the property, as I recall. I'm kind of interested in what's the capacity of what you plan to build there. And based on the grading and the like, and what might be done to potentially raise tech park property, as some have already done in their building, what does that do to give overflow protection should that pond not hold the waters necessary? And in particular, let's just say if there was a breach on the Rawhide and that water came into the north flow and ended up in the drainage collection area that you have, where's the water going to go if it overflows your collection site? Back to the west into the business park or back to the east? Where does it go? It can't all get into a constriction pipe, as you explained. It seems to me that's going to slow down the flow. So the backup, if there is any, where's it go? And how many gallons are we talking about relative to the capacity of that detention area?
Those are really good questions. And so worst case scenario, flooding event. And so if you've seen the FEMA maps for Rawhide, they're essentially basically within the channel confines along the south side of the property. And so the detention that's proposed, for instance, I think it's like page 6 into my report here. You can see that there's roughly about 6 acre feet of storage, and so again, that's quite a bit of storage, and so that will collect the runoff from the development. Let's say that you have a massive flood event, 100-year storm. That's usually what we classify as your 1% flood event for rain event, and that fills up the detention pond from the runoff. Typically, what you would actually see is different peaks. So Rawhide may actually peak from that flood event in Fremont at 40 hours. And so you would still have hydraulically flow out of the detention very likely before Rawhide is actually filled up. So from the detention, that actually will start flowing off and into Rawhide before your largest flows are actually seen for that facility. So under the worst of conditions, let's just say you even have something greater than 100, those ponds and would actually stay full. So it'd be just like Rawhide. And at that point, I hate to paint worst case scenarios, but you probably are having water in streets and so forth. And that's very unlikely to happen from that perspective. So I don't really see like Rawhide breaching into the detention or the detention backfilling and into other properties beyond that. I believe that they have the capacity required to withhold them, and they wouldn't actually overtop or flood the adjacent properties. So let's just play that scenario out to try to answer your question. If the detention were to overtop, it would happen prior to, again, Rawhide being at its highest level. And so that water would actually go south into Rawhide and continue south and west.
It has a higher barrier on the east side than it does on the west side?
Yeah,
Or
so
is you're telling me it's all going to go to the Rawhide?
So the east side, if you were to follow the grading concept that we've put together for this property, we actually show a little berm along the east side of this, and we call it, it's elevated above the pond, it's elevated above the overtopping elevation, and that berm would protect those eastern properties from any water that would actually go that direction. So that would be something that is included in our study and ultimately recommended as far as part of the grading operations. So that would be some additional protection for those, because the one developed properties immediately adjacent to this is to the east.
The properties is already there, elevated their property, I don't know, some 2 or 3 feet or whatever. What's the elevated expectation for the entire business park? Are you going to elevate that in your grading plan?
Not any high. I mean, what we have shown in our grading plan is probably a net fill and for the property. And so if you were to follow those grading contours, buyers of those properties are probably bringing in a little bit of dirt and elevating those. We did see
No measurement specific.
Go ahead.
We don't have any measurement specific. It's just going to be elevated, but we don't know what.
We didn't make recommendations for like minimum floor elevations. And one reason, because it's just the FEMA maps are flood zone A over there. And so they aren't associated with elevation. But I do understand that it is city policy to elevate those approximately 2 feet above those, anticipated flood elevations.
One other question, I'll turn it over to the rest of council. I'm interested in knowing, since when you started this study originally, and I didn't see any changes in this current study, to recognize that the ground to the north, to the west, and to the south are residential properties, and they're no longer cropland. And I'm wondering, since cropland, you explain, absorbs better than rooftops and concrete, how did your new study take into account more concrete rooftops especially on the west side, which has now been developed into apartment complexes, parking lots, and streets?
That's a good question as well. And so essentially, you're talking about basically micro and macro level studies. This was a micro study for just the tech park. And so we do not include the surrounding properties from the potential of development. And so as those properties develop outside of that, the micro level here within the boundaries of the tech park itself, we would expect studies to be done for those properties as they develop to show a non increased runoff from them as well. But I mean, if those properties are contributing additional drainage, then they are not contributing directly to the tech park property itself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Just a couple of quick questions. I just want to confirm you did provide the city, based on the FAR area ratio going from 31 to 42, an updated drainage study dated 2021, right?
Yes, yes. And like I said, I did not include particular information for the FAR rate included because it's not technically policy, I guess. But I did do some calculations for Brian to show that the FAR increase to 41 would fall within the confines of our recommendations for runoff in this study.
Just to confirm that buffer, so there's a 30-foot buffer as well as a 100-foot wide detention. How many acres is that of the actual property of detention?
I would have to get back to you about how much area that actually consists of.
The detention cell was over 2 acres, slightly over 2 acres. And I don't know that 30-foot buffer you have on the south there, Brad, how much that may be another acre or something, but there's approximately like 3 acres that we can't develop.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much, Brad. Appreciate your help.
Yeah, thank
Any
you
other
very much.
questions before we take a motion to adjourn? Take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Gibson,
I would make that motion.
Councilman Jensen,
I will second.
cast your vote to adjourn.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
The special city council meeting is adjourned. Before we call the regular city council meeting, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Time is now 7:02. We will call the city council regular meeting of April 13th to order. Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. At this time, we'll have roll call. Please cast your vote for roll call.
Eight council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item is mayor's comments. Just have a couple of things I'd want to make note. Last Saturday, we had a city auditorium grand reopening and was great. I think we had over 130 people attend, take a tour and see the great renovations that went on there. Just want to give, again, special thanks to voters for passing the bond issue. And then for staff, which received as part of the project, a $1.25 million Nebraska Civic and Community Center Financing Fund grant. And last Friday, that grant and the city auditorium was featured by a press release by the state of Nebraska. So congratulations. Thank you for your help, staff, for that. Also, just want to give a special thanks to the late Kim Koski for her tireless efforts. That was her baby. And if you haven't had a chance to get through the new city auditorium, I would take that opportunity and rent your spaces for groups, wedding receptions. I think the main arena holds over 500 total. East and West meeting rooms, I think, are 60 to 70. So it's obviously different look, but it's got all the audio visual equipment. It's ready to go for Fremont. So facility will serve Fremont for many decades to come. So thanks for all involved with that. And it was a great grand reopening ceremony. Next item, just want to mention is this is a vaccination update. So last Thursday, I did receive, as well as my wife, the first dose of the Moderna vaccination at Christensen Field. It's a part of the partnership between Three Rivers Health and Fremont Methodist Health. It was a very seamless process. You walk in, you got to make your appointment, show your ID. You're in and out in 30 minutes. So I know that vaccinations are open for those wishing to receive one. You'll want to visit bestcare.org/Fremont COVID vaccine to register. So bestcare.org/Fremont COVID vaccine. Again, thank you to all the healthcare workers, Three Rivers Health and Fremont Methodist Health. Appreciate everybody's partnership in regards to the vaccinations. That's all for my mayor's comments. Next item on the agenda would be a motion to adopt the current agenda for the April 13th, 2021 regular meeting. Is there any changes from council want to be made to the current agenda? Councilman Jensen,
If there's no changes, I'll make the motion to adopt the current agenda.
Councilman Legban,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Next item is public hearings, item 2, which is ordinance 5567 to amend UDC by text change to table 11-614.02 regarding fences and walls in residential districts. This would be to introduce and hold first reading. This time we'll have staff report. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is a request by Karen and Matt Wewell for a text change of the UDC to allow certain fences in the street yards abutting an arterial street. They're in the process of purchasing a house on a corner lot on Broad Street. They want to extend a 6-foot tall ornamental fence along the property line and redesign access to the house so that there's a driveway on the side street, and there's also a driveway on the front of the street. The proposed change addresses the safety concerns of a 6-foot tall fence by making sure that there is a sight triangle available. You have all of the text regarding fences and walls in front of you, but the specific change would state that a fence or wall built within the required street yard of a lot abutting an arterial street, including street yards of corner lots and rear yards of double frontage lots, may be built to a height of 6 feet so long as, and this is the addition, vision clearance is provided. Then it continues, if access to the property is, and cross out not taken from the same arterial street. That would ensure that if somebody is putting up a fence that isn't an ornamental fence, say a 6-foot picket fence or dog ear fence, they would have to drop it down to make sure that there would be a vision clearance triangle for the safety of getting in and out of the driveway. You'll note that the language below regarding openness would still require opacity if access is taken to that particular street. It's kind of the way it's currently written is a little more in the negative, but it would still require 50% opacity unless there is not access taken to the street. I believe that the Wewells are either here or online. I know that they want to speak, but before that, I would be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
I just want to be clear, and I think I explained it pretty well, but this sightline triangle is to give vision from the streets so that you're not impeding the corner lot visual, and also the driveway concern
Correct.
for leaving the driveway. You want to have visual at the driveway as
Correct.
well.
So the fence would have to drop down, and it's generally a 30-foot angle that goes out to make sure that that angle, as somebody is either backing out or going forward out, that they can see either direction and that there's not a collision because of a sight.
Right. And that would be required if you were using a fence that you could not see through.
Correct.
But if you were using a wrought iron fence, picket, that style fence, or or something else that was more translucent, 50% at least, that you could see through, you would not have to lower the fence height from 6 feet?
Correct, as long as you have that vision clearance available.
And subparagraph C is really only to discuss the site clearance angle, and paragraph D is to capture the visual clearance necessary regardless of height.
Paragraph D stays the same, but I bring that up because paragraph D talks about that fences in a required front yard or street yard shall not exceed 50% opacity. And then there's the exception that's on arterial streets or side yards where it says that they can exceed 50% opacity as long as there's not access taken to the arterial street.
My only concern with regards to this, I think, is the fact that if, let's just say they have a fence because they want animals. You can't go probably from a 6-foot fence to a 3-foot fence and keep a large animal contained if you have to lower the fence size down to 3 foot at the driveway line for site purposes.
In which
But
case.
but if it has enough visual,
Right,
they wouldn't have to lower the fence
correct.
size.
And that's the
down.
case here, is they want to have that ornamental fence that would be open, but it would
Right.
contain the animals. If you wanted to have a less opaque fence, you would either have to be set back outside of this street yard
Right.
setback or reduce it down.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. We'll now open the public hearing. I have Matt Wewell.
Good afternoon and thank you for your time. Hopefully audio is working properly.
It is.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Jennifer, for assisting us in this conversation with the city group here. And the purpose of it, of what we're proposing and working with Jennifer and the planning committee and so forth on, was to allow more use of the yard, but yet keep in mind the public safety aspects of that line of sight for safety moving in and out of a driveway. And because of the location on our particular lot, we also have to be cognitive of our neighbor's line of sight as well. So we started this venture in the conversation of what do we need to do to make sure we have that safety requirement in place. And so that's where we talked about the opacity at 50%. And whether it would be our yard or potentially anyone else that might like to do this, I think that is a good margin of safety for that 30-foot triangle line of sight. If they wish to have that 6-foot tall ornamental type fence. In our case, it would be a 6-foot ornamental, kind of like a wrought iron fence for our animals, which would allow us to use full capacity of that street side yard and still have access through the street side yard as well as the main arterial yard. Hopefully this proposal would allow others in the city of Fremont to be able to do likewise, provided they maintain that safety requirement for line of sights. So we like your consideration of it and any other public consideration of that for any other discussions that we might need to have on this and other readings. And basically that's all we have at the moment. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion to introduce. Councilman Yerger?
So I have a follow-up question for Jennifer. We had some fencing zoning changes that were revised in the last year or two. I can't remember exactly when, and it had to do specifically with fences that could be placed in the front yard space rather than side yard or rear yard. And I don't remember exactly whether this comes into play here or not because of what they're doing on this property, but my question is a general one. When we're talking about fences, did we not say that they can't go further than the attachment at the front of the house?
That was chain link fences.
Chain link fences. I know we have houses in town today that have fences in the front yard. A lot of them do. They're
Right.
short because I see them all over town. But I thought we made some sort of stipulation that they were going to have to attach to the house and no further front than the corner. And
That was just chain link.
it's just chain link. Thanks.
Councilman Ligban.
Yeah, I guess I have another one for Jennifer. I see the planning commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval.
That's correct.
Are you satisfied with this too?
Yes, yeah, I worked with the Weebells. We tried to come up with some language that we thought would be satisfactory to take through the process. And this seems to be something that would work. There are other questions. Fences have been a big issue here in Fremont. There are people who are on corner lots that want to have a 6-foot privacy fence. This doesn't address all of those concerns. That's something we'll have to take a little deeper dive into. But it takes the existing language for those specific conditions where you're on an arterial road, where you have that side yard line, or the double frontage lot where the back of your yard is actually on an arterial, and it addresses the fences in those particular situations.
Any other comments from council? If there's none, I would take a motion to introduce. Councilman Jensen,
Yeah, I'll make the motion to introduce and hold first reading of ordinance 5567.
Councilman Ligban,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of Ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC, Chapter 11, zoning subdivision and site development, Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability and providing an effective date on first reading.
Thank you. Moving on is the consent agenda. All items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda by council, staff, or the public? Councilman Yerger,
I have comments on items 7 and 11, please.
any other items?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont. I'd like to have item number 9 removed.
Any other items? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve consent agenda 3 through 6, 8, 10, and 12. Councilman Yerger.
I would make a motion to approve consent agenda items 3 through 6, 8, 10, 12,
And 12, yeah.
and 12.
Yep.
And I would also like to give a special shout out and kudos for the city clerk who attached Exhibit A to item 5, even though we're not discussing it tonight. My thanks.
Councilman Legban,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 7. Resolution 2021-051 to renew support contract for GIS interface, automatic vehicle locating and mapping services for 911 public service answering point PSAP. This time we'll have staff report. Go ahead, Shelley.
Good evening, Shelley Hoserland, 911 Director. This contract is to renew the support for the mapping software that's used in the 911 center, as well as the interface, which allows the mapping to interface with our computer-aided dispatch, and then the automatic vehicle location and vehicle tracking services that we receive as part of that project.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Yes, has the county approved this item yet?
Has accounting approved it?
The
The
county.
county.
Oh, the county. This is part of the
agreement.
PSAP budget. It's a budgeted item.
So it's automatically 50/50. They don't have to take something through the county and have it approved.
No.
I mean, yes, he's correct. Yes, Councilman Yerger is correct. That's the way
Yes,
it works.
yes, I'm
You said
sorry. yes.
no, but no, you're correct.
It's in the agreement, so it's
Yes.
automatically 50-50. They don't have to vote on
Correct.
anything, but we do.
Yes,
Okay.
because it's city expends funds, yes.
Okay. I still would like to, and we've done this in the past, and I'd like to do it here with the council's indulgence. The resolution 2021-051 in the now there be resolved statement says that we're paying the entire amount, 5875. Doesn't make a reference to the fact that this is a 50-50 split with Dodge County. We have inserted that language in the past. I'd like it in this resolution as well. And so I make a motion to amend to include a 50-50 split with Dodge County into that paragraph.
Good with that? All right. Any questions on that amendment? If there's none, is there a second? Councilwoman Ganem?
I would second.
So we're voting to amend resolution 2021-051 to insert language that the county is paying half, the 50-50.
The 50, you would put words in after the 5875, that it's a 50-50 split with the county.
Thank you. Cast your votes to amend.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now I'd take a motion in regards to the amended resolution 2021-051. Councilman Yerger.
Make a motion to approve the amended resolution 2021-051.
Councilman Sukram. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 9, a resolution 2021-052 approving the proposed Keno grant awards as recommended by the Keno Advisory Committee. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Lottie Mitchell, Grant Coordinator. Yes, the City of Fremont does have Keno Grant Awards available twice annually. It is based on our fiscal year. This year we had $50,000 to award, and Keno grants are to be used for community betterment. During the first round, we awarded just over 25,000 or just under 25,000, leaving $26,025 available to award this spring. And so in the staff report, you'll see all of the applicants. We had 7 this time. So demand for this grant opportunity is growing, which is great to see. And you can see the amount they've requested and the recommended award amount. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lottie. Any questions for staff? Councilman Sukram.
Nope.
Councilman Yerger.
Could you refresh me again? I think I asked this before, but I'm going to ask again because I don't recall your answer. So when we get applications for these, and it looks like April 1's the deadline. That's when you have to have them in. When does it open up for them to request them?
So they could technically put an application in now for October 1st, but
Okay.
most people wait until the week within
So it
prior
can,
to
so it
October
can happen
1st.
immediately. I mean, there's no window of opportunity.
No,
It's-
no,
okay.
it's open and then reviewed October
Okay.
1st.
How many times can you apply successively? Is there any limit?
There is not.
No limit. But there is limits as to how much you can request with regards to the policies that you would give, as I recall.
The Keno grant is a 50-50 reimbursable grant. So meaning if you were the applicant, you'd have to, and your application was for $12,000, you'd have to spend $12,000, show proof of payment to us and proof that the project was completed. We could then reimburse you 50% or $6,000.
Well, perhaps my recollection is wrong, but I thought there were special circumstances for those that might ask for, let's say, $25,000, which would be your entire fund. And there may be special circumstances, I thought, when that might be considered rather than, no, it's just over the limit, we'll never allow it. Do I remember your rules?
I don't
incorrectly?
recall any limits, no.
Okay. I'm assuming that the last 2 got in after the fact. That is, these are taken in sequence with regards to their applications, and Cats Angels and Ridge Cemetery, which made an application, got 0 because the others were awarded first.
No. All applications were received on time prior to April 1st, prior to the deadline. The committee reviewed the applications and this is their recommended award amounts.
Oh,
Cats Angels and Ridge Cemetery have been recipients of the Keno Grant Fund multiple times previously. And so the committee decided that the other applications would receive funding this round. Cats Angels and Ridge Cemetery are eligible to apply again in October for additional funds, but for this funding cycle, it was recommended that they not be awarded.
Okay. They weren't the only ones that had been awarded previously, are they?
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. The reason why I had asked to have this pulled off is because of an issue that I was asked to bring up, and I don't disagree. Archbishop Bergen is a Catholic school. It's a pay-to-go school. It is private. Having been from Catholic education for 12 years myself, I know the cost to the parent. And it is a repeated request. This was a similar request last year. It was roughly double then. And they did get funding then and they got funding now, which be that as it may, I was surprised to see that Cats Angels did not receive anything. As you know, Cats Angels relies heavily on donor funding in order to support a trap, neuter, release program and to spay and neuter the cat population. And as you also are very well aware of, they have taken care of not just a few, but hundreds of cats that have come out of hoarding situations and growing populations in various neighborhoods and business parks. And these should not have to be all by donor raised funds. So it would behoove us to see the city continue to support their program as best as you can. And if this is part of the funding request, I'm very disappointed to see that it was turned down, simply because I know the good that they do. I have volunteered for various entities within our city. And I know that they rely heavily on fosters that donate their time, their own money, their own equipment. I do very minimal because my involvement with council in the past, I provided transportation to take cats to trap, neuter, and release. And I've personally paid out of my own pocket for at least 30 cats to be neutered or spayed. And that helps reduce your population here in town. It also cuts down on the disease. These cats are fully vetted and fully vaccinated, but it does cost. They do it at a minimal because they rely on volunteers such as myself to do the transport. And they get it done at a minimal cost of roughly $30 a cat. And you can't do that without some funding. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilman Jensen?
Well, barring any further discussion on this, I just say I agree with many of Susan Jacobus's points there, have made those to staff. Following conversations here, I would recommend we amend and put the recommended amount to Archbishop Bergen at 4,500 and then the remaining 4,000 to Cats Angels.
Councilman Yerger?
A second is motion.
Sir, any discussion? Councilman Legband?
Yeah, I just want to make sure this is okay that we do that, Lottie. I mean, we had a long discussion about all these things, but I'm okay with that too. It was a tough decision, but I also
Sure.
want to know if it's legal that we do these and make these changes.
It is absolutely allowable, and maybe some more background information for the rest of council. Just to kind of talk about previous awards that Cats Angels has received. Nothing against their entity. They do great work for our community. And there was a long discussion amongst this Keno Advisory Review Committee. And how do we fund and where do we fund? You only have so much money to go around. Cats Angels did receive approximately $8,600 in October this fiscal year. They've also received previously, and that laid into, part of the decision. It was considered. How do we divvy up the small amount of money that we do have? Bergen, Archbishop Bergen, it is for their auditorium, which houses youth sports. And so I think that's, the committee considered that as well. It's difficult when you're weighing all of these applications. And so Councilman Jensen, or excuse me, Legman, yes, it is absolutely allowable to amend what the committee has awarded. But I just wanted to provide that bit of information for the rest of council who was not involved in those conversations.
Lottie, just to confirm, there were more applications this time than usual, right? I mean,
Right. Yes, we had 7. Usually we get maybe 5. So to have 2 more than 5, I mean, that's a lot. And the amount of requests was dramatically more. People's programs are growing. That's a good thing. We're serving and reaching a further population. And so as the demand for our fund grows, these choices will get harder and harder.
Thank you. Any other comments from council before we? Councilwoman Ganem.
Mark, you're still.
Mark.
To look at Bergen as a school, not necessarily that it's private or that people have to pay to attend it. Because for their sports events, that's really a lot of people that attend. It's for our kids, and their kids are our kids, all belong in Fremont. So it's for the kids.
Any other comments from council? So there's a motion and a second to amend 4,500 to Bergen, 4,500 to Cats Angels. Is that correct, Lottie? No?
Jensen
So-
made it, so ask Mark.
Mark, I
Go
think-
ahead, Councilman Jensen. I'm sorry.
We've had some discussion. I just wanted to make the point, Archbishop Bergen, I guess they're an important part, but they certainly have more resources than Cats Angels does. And if this is public money, and I would rather see it go to something public.
I just wanted to verify the amounts. The recommendation was for 8,500 to Bergen. Your motion was to 4,500 to Bergen, and then the other 4,000 to Cats.
Okay.
I just want to make sure okay.
And there was a second, right? Okay, all right. Okay, please vote on that amendment.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now I would take a motion to the amended Keno Grant Awards Resolution 2021-052. Councilman Jensen,
I'll make a motion to approve amended resolution 2021-052.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Item 11, Resolution 2021-054, awarding the bid from CR Men Concrete LLC for the concrete flat work at the utility warehouse. This time we'll have staff report.
Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator, Utilities. This job is for concrete replacement at the warehouse, 3000 East First Street. It's to repair the main entrance that has become cracked over the last 20 years from primarily the front end loaders and large equipment that we have out there. Boom trucks, dump trucks, construction equipment, stuff like that. And then to replace the drive into our secondary parking lot, and then to pave the southeast corner of the building. That section right now is curbed and grassed. We have construction workers that come out to the plant, and that's kind of a tight turn, and that area is always getting the curbs getting knocked down, the grass is always dead. So we thought we would just pave that section and allow for an easier turn for our trucks and for the construction workers that come out. I can take any questions.
Any questions for Troy? Councilman Sukram, you're on. Councilman Yerger.
Don't have any questions, but I'd like to amend the resolution language in the second whereas statement to read this way. The Utility and Infrastructure Board has reviewed the proposals received and recommended 3-0 to accept at their March 30th meeting, the bid from CRM Men. We've asked numerous times to have the vote count of the commissions and boards recommending to us noted, and it's in the staff report. We just need to transfer it over here to record the 3-0 vote from the March 30th meeting.
Legal. Okay. Any other questions for staff before we go on? Any comments from the public? So there'd be a motion to amend to include the 3-0 vote and the date of March 30th in the whereas statement. Councilman Jensen,
I'll second that.
cast your votes to amend.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now I would take a motion in regards to the amended resolution 2021-054. Councilman Yerger.
Motion to approve amended resolution 2021-054.
Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to unfinished business. Item 13, ordinance 5563, approving sale of Tech Park property to Brian Lavander to operate body shop business. This would be for final reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. Again, this is the final reading to approve the lot sale to Brian Lavander. Iron's going to put in, or anticipates putting in, a body shop. The next item you'll see on here is his option agreement. We had that on an earlier agenda. We continued that item until this meeting to coincide with the final reading. So I'd entertain any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
My question really is one as to, I guess, the appropriateness of this and the discussion with the purchaser. This is a major auto repair business by classification in the UDC, correct?
I'm not sure. That would be a Jennifer question.
Take my word for it. It is. Because it is, this location might create some problems, both logistically for the purchaser with regards to street access. But more importantly, I am concerned, I think, about the potentiality of noise or chemical issues that might affect the daycare that's already purchased property directly to the east. I don't know whether those questions can be answered tonight or not relative to the kind of work that goes on in that location and whether or not there would be outside storage along with this body shop. Typically there is at most body shops, and those are restrictions as well. And so I raise those concerns with regards to the buyer's awareness. And I'm also keenly aware, as I pointed out in numerous occasions before, we're selling this for less than what we have invested, and that's problematic for me.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem.
Do we know that does the daycare know what's next to them?
They do.
Okay.
We've had conversations. She's not concerned.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Sukram.
Yeah, I was curious, is the vent, I'm assuming he's gonna have a paint booth. So does he have a venting system, a filter system that goes out of the building? Do we know?
Oh, I'm sure he does. I mean, this is like his 8th one, so
Okay.
that he's built. So
I guess that would have been.
he knows body
Maybe a
business.
better question for him, but I know when they have a paint booth, they have a filtration system that has to, I just don't want, I kind of agree with
Councilman Yerger about making sure the daycare doesn't have any problems with what's around.
Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This requires a conditional use permit in the BP district, so that will be coming forward on the next Planning Commission agenda. And if you look at the use-specific requirements for major automobile repair services, which you're correct, this is one. Paint bays are required to be wholly within a fully enclosed building that is designed for this purpose and approved by the building official. So I would assume that they would have to have appropriate ventilation. Outdoor service storage is allowed, but no more than 5 vehicles awaiting repair are allowed to be stored for a period exceeding 6 days. The outdoor storage area has to be screened with a fence of a minimum height of 6 feet. All repair activities must take place entirely within a building, and adequate precautions have to be taken on behalf of the operators so they don't create an undue burden on neighboring properties.
Councilman Coons is, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna make the comment, the company I work for has a paint booth, and state regulation from the Nebraska Department of Environment Energy requires that you have filtration. I can't remember the name of the gauge that you have to have, and then you have to keep a log book to show that you've maintained proper maintenance of that on a regular basis. So it is a requirement.
Councilman Yerger.
Well, I'm going to mention, I think you skipped one of the ones that I remember reading there, and that this type of business has to exit onto a collector street.
This would be classified
it-
as a
to get a
collector
permit.
street.
I don't see how it can. It doesn't collect a thing. From Lincoln to Jaeger, there isn't another street, period.
Actually, if you look at the definition,
I
of
have looked at the
collector
definition
street,
of a collector street, and that's not it.
I disagree.
Councilman Legman.
Yeah, again, they're gonna do their due diligence. They've got things figured out. Our staff has things figured out. May not always agree with it, Brad, but sometimes they know what they're doing. So do the lawyers, so do the businesses.
There's no other comments. I'd take a motion to hold final reading. Councilman Coons,
Make a motion to hold third and final reading of ordinance 5563.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
Now have final reading.
An ordinance pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Nebraska to Brian Levander pursuant to Nebraska law on final reading.
Cast your final vote.
Vote is 7-1. The ordinance is approved.
Item 14 would be a motion to approve the option agreement for a lot in the city's tech park, again with Brian Levander. Staff, any other comments? Any other comments from staff? You mentioned this in your first report.
No, he just wants the option to purchase that lot. If you look at the map, it's kind of stranded because 32nd Street, we have no intention of the paving anytime soon, but he would like the option to purchase that lot someday. And so he's willing to pay us for an option to hold it for a certain period of time.
Any questions for staff? Any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont, Nebraska. You're asking somebody to hold off on selling that property. And as Brian had said and commented numerous times, as every sale of every property, and he has numerous businesses lining up, why would you hold that property? For $1,000, if somebody wants to move and locate to that property, I'm sure we'll find a way to get 32nd Street paved. But he just had commented prior at the beginning of tonight's sessions that there were numerous people knocking on the doors to look at those properties and for consideration. $1,000 is not enough to hold that option open, not for 2 solid years. That's a long time to hold a property open.
Any other comments from the public? Comments from council, Councilman Yerger?
Yeah, I have several comments. I agree with the comment that was just made. I think a selling option for $1,000 is quite honestly not in the best interest of the citizens of Fremont. $1,000 hold is not even close to the earnest money you have to put down if you're actually going to make a purchase. There's no stated job requirement for this hold, like there is in every other sale that we're making, even though this is only an option, that it's not going to contribute any headcount in the near term towards the 31 job requirement by putting this on hold. And this agreement, although it's kind of cookie cutter with regards to all the rest of the purchase agreements that we've had, even though it's an option, there's no reference in this particular purchase agreement to reference the closing costs that will be included at the time any such option were to be exercised. So I think there are a lot of failures with regards to this option agreement, and I'm not in favor of approving this. And I would move that we not approve this tonight.
Councilman Ligman?
Yeah, I have a staff question. If someone offers or wants to buy it, anyone can buy this lot at any time. Am I
Absolutely.
correct or wrong?
It's got a first right of refusal, and so he would have to buy it at that time at that price. There's a first right of refusal that apparently you didn't read.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Jensen?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood correctly. It's a right of first refusal. So if somebody comes and wants that lot, Lavender's got to make a decision at that time.
You're absolutely right. And again, that lot is stranded until we pave 32nd Street. There is no access to it.
Any other comments? If there's none, I would take a motion to approve option agreement. There's a motion not to approve. Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second. Now, is there a motion to approve? Councilman Legban?
I make a motion to approve the option agreement with Brian Lavender.
Councilman Coons?
No, second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
Item 15, ordinance 5565, approving sale of Tech Park property to Slam Enterprises LLC, Total Fire, to build a new building for their business. This would be for second reading. We'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, this is second reading. Eric is here again tonight to talk about his plans to do an expansion project. If you notice, there's 3 lots he intends to purchase or would like to purchase there. A fairly large parcel, but I think it's in keeping with the FAR, with the floor area ratio. I know he's planning on a large building, possibly 2. And so I think Eric can talk about a little bit more about his plans. And so I would take any questions and encourage you to move this on.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
I seem to recall at the last meeting that we changed paragraph D, partial refund purchase price, to reflect 2 jobs instead of 3, but it's not in this reading. Do you recall it different?
No, I thought we made that change. So
It's not in the documentation in my packet.
we'll make that change before it gets to final.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Go ahead.
Hi, Eric Lozo, 4623 North County Road 19. I'm president of Total Fire. I guess one of the things I wanted to touch on that really didn't get to talk about last time, I guess, is what our real plans are. Obviously, we want to build a building for Total Fire. 3 acres is a lot of property. So obviously, we want to develop at least one of the other acres into other businesses. And the problem I'm seeing now is potentially, when we're in the planning phase a little bit here, is the impact that the 31% to the 41% would have on economic development in the business park. You can build per acre, you can build another 4,300 square foot with that increase of leasable, space that will create jobs. And especially with the drainage studies and everything, we were looking at some property on North Yeager that wasn't annexed by the city, and it was a 46% build. It worked. Not saying this doesn't work, but I don't see why it wouldn't be increased when it can bring that much economic impact to that business park, when the studies have been done, obviously. That's the only thing I really have to add. We're here to grow. We've got the right idea. It's just a matter of being able to do more with more space. So appreciate it. Any questions anybody has on that?
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Is there any other comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem?
Probably should have asked earlier, just for clarification, you are going to build for SLAM, and then you're going to build to sublease to other businesses for now?
So
Is that how I understood it?
yeah, Slam LLC is actually 4 of us owners of Total Fire. We just not putting all of our eggs in one basket. So that will be Total Fire's building that we're building. We're the ownership group. We're just doing it under a different name. And as far as the other businesses, we plan on trying to build some flex space to make, I've got other contractors that want to come in. There's just not a lot available. And we'll see what else the city allows us to do in a growing area. But we want to do things fairly quick here. So, yep.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
I would only make this comment. I appreciate the fact that you're already here in town and you're locating out here. I applaud that. No problems, no questions in that regard. I probably should have asked you directly. I asked this question the last time, so I'm going to ask you this time. We've moved off of the $20,000 price to a $25,000 price roughly, by virtue of not giving you the same $14,000 per lot purchase discount that was given to others. And I asked last time, how did we get to that? I'd be interested in knowing any discussions that you had in the settlement of your contract and how we went from 14,000 to 7,500.
It was actually 12,000.
Excuse me, 12,192. I'm sorry.
Well, to be perfectly honest, the discussion was that obviously we originally wanted to build up on 32nd, and we looked at what it was going to cost because we were going to have to pay for that road. You move to 29th, basically what we're doing is we're taking on that cost by giving that discount of our road frontage. So to us, it was do it now, do it later. But at this point, at least there was some, it worked out for us. We wanted to be on 29th Street and it was cheap. It was a little more expensive, but we didn't have to kick in on the roads the way we're seeing it. So it was a trade-off for us. So we're kicking in on the roads just in a different way. So
I appreciate your transparency and thank you for clearing up how that came about. So again, this is another one of those we're selling for less than cost. But I would make a motion to amend and correct officially for the second time, 3 jobs to 2 jobs in paragraph 3D of this purchase agreement.
Is there a second to amend? Councilman Ellis?
Second.
Cast your votes to amend.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now I would take a motion in regards to the amended ordinance 5556 to hold second reading. Councilman Coons?
Motion to hold second reading of the amendment ordinance.
Councilman Legman?
I will second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have second reading.
An ordinance pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Nebraska to Slam Enterprises LLC pursuant to Nebraska law on second reading.
Moving on now to item 16, ordinance 5566 to amend table 11-603.01.01 floor area ratio for business park district. This would be to introduce and hold first reading. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. We discussed this with some detail at the last meeting, and at that time, the council asked that it be held over until a revised drainage study was presented, which was presented during the study session this evening. In the interest of time, I won't go through all of the details in the staff report that I went through at the last meeting, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or go into details if you do have those questions.
Any questions for Jennifer? Thank you, Jennifer. Any comments from the public?
Jerry Delaney, 2940 Laverna Street. I'm president of the Central Park Homeowners Association. I wasn't overly concerned personally when we first heard about the proposed floor area ratio changes. I was happy to see development of the business park, and I hope that in turn, this would bring improved drainage plans to a piece of property that's caused my neighbors and myself many problems over the years. But as I and others in the area started to look into this, we started to become very concerned. All we really wanted a few weeks ago was a little honest information on how the property was going to drain and assurance that the flooding issue in our neighborhood that had been caused by runoff from city property was going to be improved. So we asked for a meeting and we were granted a little over 2 weeks ago. A group of us met with city administrators and our city administrator, and the planning director. We were told at that meeting that there had not been a previous drainage study done on the area, but that there was one in process that should be available before the final reading and vote on whether or not this flood area ratio should be increased. 3 days later at the city council meeting, we were given a completely different information. We were told that there was no new study being done and that there was now a study that had been found that had been previously done. When we questioned how valid this forgotten 8-year-old study was, we were told that no new study needed to be done because it was still accurate despite many changes to the area, that a new study would cost money and take time, and it'd be practical to simply review the old study. Now we have a new study that has been done since then. And we're supposed to be at ease after all these changes, and what was done, is being done, wasn't done. And we're supposed to assume that proper protocol and diligence has been adhered to throughout this whole process. Given how many times this simple request for basic information has changed over the course of the few weeks, we are not comfortable that any of us, including those of you on the council, have been given accurate information. Leaving the existing floor area ratios will not stop development of the tech park. It will show that we are at least not taking steps in the wrong direction and addressing an existing problem with flooding in not just our area, but in the entire city. We're not asking you, we're begging you to not even consider making a change to not just this one, but all the current and future business developments in our city. A change that can potentially have negative effects on hundreds and long-term, potentially thousands of residents, just so we can accommodate a few potential purchasers of some portions of one development at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
I have a handout.
Yeah, we'll take care of it. Yeah. All right. I take a motion to receive. Councilman Legman,
I make a motion to
Councilman Sukram,
Second.
cast your votes. Legman and Sukram. Yep. Cast your vote again to receive.
Motion carries 8-0 to receive, Mayor.
Go ahead.
My name is Scott Euling, 1335 Glenwood Court here in Fremont. I'm a small business, excuse me, I'm a small business owner and I'm not opposed to this park. However, I have some concerns about this drainage report. As you heard the engineer on record tell us earlier that the crop ground as it sits right now, half of it flows to the north and half of it flows to the south. The north goes into a ditch that heads straight east to the Elkhorn River. The south half comes into the Rawhide Creek as it currently sits. The inconsistency I see in this report is the fact that they did a computer model of that. That is the graphic shown there in my handout. It's this here. Now, this was done with HydroCAD. It's a computer program that simulates surface water runoff. I'm not a HydroCAD expert, but I have used it before and I am familiar with it. What they're modeling here is the north half of the property of the 80 acres and the south half of the property. They show it going into 5L. That 5L represents Rawhide Creek. This is the baseline that they used, the crop ground. This is not what he said was happening. It's not what's in the report on page 1 in the 3rd paragraph. This isn't correct. And the problem with doing this is you automatically elevate the baseline, because what we're really concerned about here is change. We know water already runs down the Rawhide Creek. We don't know how much, not even the engineer on record knows how much goes down there normally. But what we want to know is how much is going to change when we add parking lots, add buildings, and now you're asking to add bigger buildings, but we don't know. So why is this a big deal? Well, on the 7th page of this report, 2nd paragraph, last sentence on there, I'll read it for you. Based on the drainage analysis completed for the Fremont Technology Park, the 100-year peak discharge from the site could increase as much as 39 CFS, 39 cubic feet per second, or 17,000 gallons per minute. In my table down here, I have a very simplified spreadsheet, 2 small spreadsheets here. The one on the bottom left indicates their model, indicates pre-development and post-development. These are their numbers, not my numbers. And you will see down there that the difference is 39 CFS. When you take into consideration and correct this model and put the north half going to the north ditch and the south half going to the Rawhide, now you have a lower baseline. That is shown in the other small down there. And you will see that the difference is more than double of what they say it will be. So the validity is very questionable here. And I hear a lot of economics. I get it. I'm a small business owner, but please, let's take the time to do the homework. This is cheap. Moving dirt and pouring concrete is not cheap. And let's not do it on the backs of the homeowners that are living along Rawhide Creek. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? I have on Zoom Dave Mitchell.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Pleased to appear tonight on behalf of Seth McGinn with McGinn Holdings and Can Cooker Company. I can't speak to the study. We have reviewed the drainage study, and what it appears to us from our perspective is that the increase in the FAR would not have an impact upon the neighboring landowners in a measurable respect, but we'll defer to the council and staff and its engineers as far as that is concerned, because the science is a science, and how you determine that to be at the end of the day is how you determine it to be. From Seth's standpoint, from a business standpoint, and if I understood the Total Fire gentleman correctly earlier, we're talking about potentially a 0.46 ratio, where what's proposed is a 0.41. When Seth purchased the original 4 acres and began having his site plan developed, that's when he had discovered that he was going to have to purchase additional land in order to construct ultimately through a phased approach, a 128,000 square foot building. The FAR ratio, in addition to purchasing another 2 acres, would have to be increased to 0.462 or a change in zoning to light industrial. And from a business perspective, if you compare the coverage here versus residential, which is actually less, while at the same time you have businesses that want to maximize the space that they can utilize for business operations, we're kind of at an interesting dichotomy. But in any event, we understand that 0.41 is on the table tonight, and at 260,000 square feet, that with a 0.41 ratio, that's going to leave Seth with the maximum he can build on this site of about 106,600, if my math was correct, which is still less than 120. He's not excited about that, but he can live with that as a compromise. Would prefer to be up at 0.462, similar to light industrial, so it can maximize the use of the property. But there's still a significant portion of that property that won't be dedicated to impervious coverage that otherwise could be. And as a practical matter, with the 0.41 ratio, we're still significantly less in coverage at the end of the day than we were prior to the adoption of the UDC. And if we want to attract businesses to this site and help them maximize their profit and ultimately employment, ultimately value of these tracts with the improvements and all of the other multiple effects that go along, I think we need to, subject to the science, maximize the amount of space that we can grant to developers, builders, owners to maximize the use of their property ultimately for the overall benefit of the community. But if we end up remaining at 0.342, Seth has authorized me to say that this site just won't work for him. It won't be enough square footage ultimately for what he wants to accomplish. And obviously he has some significant goals as well as hard plans, which are manifested by the size of building that he wants to build. So he's indirectly telling you he's got some great irons in the fire, but he needs room to do it. And if he doesn't have room to do it here, then he doesn't have any choice but to look elsewhere. But we hope that's ultimately not the case. He's walked forward in good faith as a local business person, has even leased a portion of his existing facility to Forever Home, so that they've got a home in anticipation of this particular transaction being somewhat easier than it has been. But we know that there's processes we have to go through, and we're okay with that. But he's going to need to have at least 0.41 FAR for this site to work. And I know you don't legislate for specific individuals, but I've understood other similar businesses that are purchasing property in the business park have similar concerns as Seth. And so I think it behooves us, if we've got a business park, to do what we can for the business owners who are devoting Fremont as a place to live as opposed to someplace else. So thanks very much for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Take a motion to receive. Councilman Jensen,
I will make the motion to receive.
Councilman Legman,
I'll say that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Okay, hello, my name is Linda Hazerbrook. My husband Steve and I live at 925 East Fifth. And as we stated at the last city council meeting, we also own the duplex property at 1711 East Cumming. I would like to start our comments with a quote from a foundational article we read in the past regarding basic land rights. Quote, "No man is an island" is a well-known saying that seems to advance the thought that all persons are connected to each other by common goals and obligations. The same can be said for real property. No land exists in isolation. If one owns land, one must deal with all the people that surround the land, unquote. Our rainwater runoff flooding problem is an example in Fremont when all the players are not connected by common goals and obligations. The business owners and the city of Fremont obviously had common goals, but you left out the rest of the neighborhood that now becomes a water retention lake. What happened to common goals and obligations? Is the rest of the neighborhood just expected to pay the price for common goals and forget about common obligations? We understand that the two businesses now object to city road pavement and therefore drainage improvement along their properties. Common goals and obligations, seems they obtained their goals and the city obtained their goals with no consideration for common goals and obligations to the neighborhood. The city of Fremont in the past was motivated to allow dramatic impervious land changes in our neighborhood by approving and funding the changes through LB 840 lending. Our situation is nowhere near the scale of the proposal in front of you today. In our situation, one property changed was about 2.1 acres and the other property probably 5 or more acres. These changes were not studied, nor does the city have any provision for grading permits like other communities in flat eastern Nebraska have to prevent these exact types of problems and damage. Our fourplex building and property, as well as a business, another building, and several other properties flood, not with river flooding, not a 100-year rain event, not with 20-year, 10, or even a 5-year rain event, but with only a common 1.5-inch rain that comes too quickly. We would ask the city council to recognize the price our neighborhood in Ward 4 continues to pay and prevent that from happening to our northern citizens, friends, and neighbors next to the city business park. Please do not allow further impervious land changes to business park designated properties, and stop and take a step back to review the entire business park project and its impact. Please include the common goals and obligations of all concerned, the city, the builders, and the people you all represent in the city of Fremont. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Mayor and members of the city council, thanks for the time to talk. My name is Ray Bierman. I live at 1241 County Road X, Fremont. And I'm a property owner over in the Cambridge Square and Central Park. I, like many here, am not against the development here. We just want to see that we take time to do it with respect to existing properties that are there. My reason for owning those properties is a small business as well. I do rentals. Came to this Fremont area in 2016. And in that time, we have seen 2 100-year events occur in just those 5 years. In 2019, that event took place on frozen ground, and it can show you the speed and the amount of water that can move over a non-absorbing surface. Increasing this floor area just stresses out a maxed out system. It can't handle any more than what it's doing now. And, you know, we have heard a lot of talk about all of the new development, but we need to take into concern the neighborhood that's already there. Cannot just stress enough how much the area ratio does affect drainage. One of the comments earlier was maybe we look at storm sewer. That would be nice if you could take it to an area that's away from ground zero. Also comments in the study, they talked about farmland, and a comment I've got is, yeah, that first inch on farmland doesn't hurt you. It's the second inch that starts to run off. And now we're just getting to that second inch a lot faster. And talk about the retention ponds. Go out to the Lincoln Premium. You want to see what retention ponds can do if they're large enough to handle the area they're protecting. So the only last thought on the study is it basically only considered the tech park, and there's lots of area around it that, like it says, has already changed the development of what it was listed when the report was done. So just take some time, think about it. unintended consequences still have effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Take a motion to receive. Councilman Yerger,
Motion to receive.
Councilman Coons,
I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Paul Von Baron, 2046 East 30th, Fremont. I could probably let the pictures speak for us. What this is coming down to is the classic question in Fremont is we want to develop businesses. But the other side of this is what is the impact to homeowners? When this study was done in 2013, a 100-year event was considered to be a little over 6 inches. 3 years later and 3 years after that, we have now had 2 100-year events. So our concern is that with our track record of knowing what will happen and with the study that was done before we understood the full impact that 100-year events can happen twice in 5 years, that the expansion of buildings without even having roads and surfaces yet designated carries one more level of risk in addition to what we've seen. Specifically, the problem is that if you really think about the study is a study to get the water to the park boundary. That is it. Put it in the rawhide and then let it take from there. So in the last year, 5 years, we've had 2 of those 100-year events. A 100-year event it drops roughly 14 million gallons on that 80 acres. All that water is now, instead of concentrating in 3 hours as it did previously, the engineering study says it now concentrates in only 2 hours. So it's going to concentrate 30% faster. The engineering report, if you look at it, will tell you that a 100-year event will overflow your existing basin by a little over 3 feet. I think it's 33.3, roughly 40 inches. That's in the drainage report itself. It will overflow your basin. And now, instead of 2 drainage ditches that could handle it, everything is going on down to the rawhide. The flooding that you're seeing in those first pictures in our neighborhood was done with only half that amount of water. Now we're going to take all that water and we're going to concentrate that in one area that we already know will not hold what's happened twice in the last 5 years. This can be solved. It's not impossible. So what we're asking is before you make exceptions to the UDC and expand building sizes even further, we're asking you to rethink the study and redevelop it in light of what you know will happen. And that's the 10-year versus the 100-year. There is a storm sewer option that the city has already mentioned as the best option. That can be done. And very simply, you could actually build a larger retention basin, and that would probably also handle the problem as well. Less than a month ago, we sat in the conference room just back of us discussing this, and the term used for the rawhide for drainage was worthless. That's why we put that second page of pictures in there. The city itself acknowledges that the rawhide is worthless for drainage, and yet we're going to double up on doing what we're doing. The reasons are it's too expensive because it's easy and cheap to run water the rawhide. It takes too much time. We understand there could be some delays for businesses moving to the park, but this is classic. Businesses are at stake. We understand that, but so are 178 homes. The people in those 178 homes are asking a couple of simple questions. At what point does it become too expensive for us to deal with the flooding? Aren't the tens of thousands, and that's no exaggeration, we have spent tens of thousands of dollars in prevention and damage from water already coming from that park.
I have to ask you to wrap it up.
That'll be fine. And the last comment is it going to take too much time? The time that you save, if you don't get this right, is going to be our problem forever. That's the simple point. So we're not asking you to stop. We're not asking you to say never. We're simply asking you to delay this change until you really understand the full impact of what you're doing. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont, Nebraska. I appreciate the comments made by Ms. Hazerbrook, Mr. Von Buren, Mr. Yulin, and Mr. Bierman, and they were spot on. Some of the comments are reminiscent of conversations we had before when some additions were proposed to the development along Laverna Street and beyond. As you know, in prior rains, that whole area flooded. And it cost thousands of dollars to those homeowners that they had to take on, many of whom this is their first and last new home that they would ever build in their lifetime. And it took on water they shouldn't have taken on because the city allowed a developer to put a pond out there that was already half full. So when the rain came, not 100-year, not a 5-year, but a 1-year, it filled up. Nobody designed channels to get the water out. So the new fix on the proposed addition to the development was to put it to the rawhide. You all know that the rawhide doesn't originate here in Dodge County. The waters we're taking come farther west. It's a floodway in our neighboring county of Colfax. Not a floodplain, but a floodway, which means you cannot build in that area. We are not responsible owners of the rawhide within our county. And I don't mean we as a loose term, just the city, but also farmers and the property owners along the rawhide. We don't maintain it being cleaned out. You are not going to be able to guarantee these homeowners who are paying thousands and thousands of dollars in taxes annually that support everything you do as a city entity, but also your schools, that you will protect them from additional floodwaters that this is going to impact. You saw what 2019 did. North Nye almost flooded out because of the rawhide coming out of its banks, but because of some quick thinking by some bunkers well placed and some coal ash mixed with sand farther to the west of Fremont, it prevented further waters coming down the rawhide. Otherwise, the entire Washington Heights area would have flooded, and it would have flooded in the streets of Fremont. Rawhide is not a good intermittent waterway of the state. It's not protected. It's not cleaned out. What are you going to do to guarantee there is no adverse impact to these citizens that are already here? It isn't, well, so what, you were here first, but now somebody else is here to build. You have to be responsible. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
Yes, I had a few concerns. I expressed them before, but I want to go through a couple of these yet tonight. First and foremost, when we went from the old code to the new UDC, if you look at the changes that were actually implemented, the light industrial area, when we changed from the calculations of removing setbacks and the like and going to a FAR calculation, which is much more straightforward, their calculations, one versus the other, old versus new, only modified the result about 3%. Slightly larger building allowed under the UDC. When you go back to the business park, the UDC versus old code, I believe, already accommodated about a 15% increase in the simplistic approach of the FAR. 38% is what's being requested. And we're trying to drive the business park to be, in essence, commensurate with light industrial. Well, quite honestly, I understand that Mr. McGinn's building needs more accommodation for what he has for property. It almost approaches to the fact that he needs the general industrial FAR ratio to be adequately comfortable. The light industrial is marginal. For 041 isn't something that will probably get what he wants. But I would also ask you this, if I'm a business, or not a business owner, if I'm a resident of Fremont and I have an acreage and I want to build a significantly large house on that acreage and it doesn't meet your city code, I'd be willing to bet you if the resident comes into the city hall and says, I want to build a house that's got more coverage than is allowed by city code, will you change it for me? I'm going to buy the property. The answer is going to be, we're not going to do that for you. We have a city code. You'll build within the limits. And I think that's what this is all about here with regards to our UDC. The business park, quite honestly, wasn't intended to be light industrial. It wasn't intended to be general industrial, or we would have so designated it. It was to be a technology park, since converted to a business park. And the standards for the UDC were put in with that anticipation. And I would also hasten to point out that the illustrative material that we've been given here, you'll notice in the actual table that's in city code, the current FAR is 342. But all the exhibit work that we had done was done at a FAR 314. And the FARs are very sensitive with regards to the amount of square footage that they produce for building size. And so I don't believe the comparisons are good. I believe that the citizens have raised some good common sense questions with regards to the potential flooding problems, some of the inadequacies of the study. And I'm not an engineer, but I looked through the study and I went through that document page by page. And when I went through that document, I didn't ask the engineer earlier in the evening, but the cover page changed. There were some non-substantive changes to page 2. We added some UDC language info on page 3. We had some non-substantive pages on pages 5, 6, and 7. We changed the drainage maps to add a date on map 1 and to change the date and add some lot designations on map 2. And the HydroCAD report seems to be not changed at all. Now, we're calling that a new study. I don't really think so. It basically, to me, looked like a regurgitation of what we had. And I think some of the folks in the audience are trying to point that out for us tonight. Business park is great, and we need to develop the business park. And others have said tonight, they're not opposed to that either. Those in the audience and others up front. I'm not either, but I think we need to develop it in the right frame. We need to make sure that the ordinances are applicable across the entire city. If we have another business park place, let's say over on Johnson Drive on the east side between the Catholic Church and Military, with that business park there, would you want the ratios to be 0.41 rather than 0.342, which is fairly significant already? Would you want those size of buildings there? Because when you change code, it affects the entire city, past, present, or not past, current, and future. And so we have to do this with extreme diligence. And I think the business park category was exactly what it needs to be. And unfortunately, you know, if you need more room to build, then you need to have more property to build on. It's not go change the code to make it happen for you so that you can do it with the smaller amount of property. So I'm very uncomfortable with what we're doing here at this juncture.
Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I just have one question here. I hope I'm looking at this correctly, and I guess I'll display my ignorance if I'm not. But does the change from a 0.314 FAR to a 0.41 FAR change the 84% impervious coverage at all? And isn't that what the issue is with the flooding, is impervious coverage?
And that's what I asked remember I asked Brad Marshall that, to have him look at that when he updated the study. And so when I asked him to update the study, I told him to go back through to take a look at what was done in 2013, which at the time we met, I didn't know it existed. Jennifer said, hey, we found this drainage study. I'd never seen the thing before. And so when I found it, then I forwarded on to Brad. Brad said, oh yeah, we did that in 2013. So look through it again and make sure it's still applicable today. Knowing now what you know, We sent him what the lots were. He's done the preliminary plat. He certainly knows how we're developing it. We sent him the proposed businesses that are locating there with a specific question. If we raised it from 0.31, I guess Jennifer needs to talk about, is it 0.31 or 0.4? But if you raised it to 0.41, would it have any impact on the drainage study? And you heard him say, we took that into consideration. I ran the math. I did the calculations. No, our 84% impervious coverage still applies today. Now, Jennifer, would you talk a little bit about 0.31 or 0.4? Is it 0.31 or 0.4?
It is 0.34
Point
instead
three.
of 0.314. I
Okay,
dyslexic. Flipped it.
you must have flipped it.
It does, yeah, it doesn't make that.
But
does
could
not
you
make
explain
that big of
also
a
the prior
difference.
code was like 0.6? was
The,
it?
it was, we did not have a floor area
Oh, that's right.
ratio in the code prior to the UDC. At the time that the business park was developed, there was a building coverage ratio of 0.6, which would be 60% of the area could be developed as buildings. That doesn't include driveways, it doesn't include sidewalks, but that, or parking areas, it's 60% building coverage. That's what was assumed in the original study. And they assumed a 84% impervious coverage then, and Brad confirmed tonight and with the new study that that was still a valid percentage.
Councilman Legman.
Yeah, if I'm hearing people right, is there any way that we could make that drainage retention pond deeper than what is proposed right now? Because I think I heard a couple of you say, if the drainage retention pond was a little deeper, it would help you. So I would, if that's feasible or doable, I think.
So we looked at that. Remember, you're at static water table. It was planned to be dry, not wet. And so if you dig it deeper, you will have a pond there, which some would argue would be a nice aesthetic. Others would say, no, you got cattails and now you got varmints and you've got other things to worry about. We really would not, I don't think we would deepen it. If anything, we'd make it larger. But again, I mean, this is, I mean, now that Scott, has got some questions on the study, I'll forward these to Brad. And when we come to second reading, Brad can address these and take a look at it and get back to you on his calculations.
And then when you
talk
get,
to you about it.
talk to Brad, would you propose maybe a deeper retention pond? If that
Well,
would-
again, if you're
I
making
think
it any
would be-
deeper,
It wouldn't be deeper, it would be
maybe
wider,
larger.
larger,
Okay, all right.
have more capacity.
So we'll have Brad again. Dave Godigan is out, so otherwise Dave would
Mhm.
be here to explain the design. And because we talked at great lengths about the depth and whether it's appropriate to be dry or wet.
Because already they have proposed that 100-foot retention pond, and then there's still another 30 feet buffer zone.
That's on the south.
No,
It's-
on the west. It'd be 30 feet on the
On the,
back.
on the south side is where he talked about an additional 30-foot buffer zone
along
against the
Rawhide.
Rawhide Creek.
Yeah, I think Mark is asking
Right,
between
but
the
it-
lots and the detention cell.
Right, the detention
So if
cell
there- Could we
is,
go into the buffer zone a little bit more to make this retention pond wider?
you would reduce the width or the depth of those lots on the east end. But sure, you could make the detention cell bigger.
Wider, yes.
But the
I-
question is it, by making it bigger, does it make a difference, that much of a difference? And that's an engineering question, and I'm not even going to
I think. it'd
pretend
be-
I know
It'd be worth
whether,
looking at, even if we went into part of their buffer zone to make it wider for everybody.
Well, we can't go into buffer zone because that's could be private property. And so the city,
you would have to reconfigure the
you'd have to
lot
reconfigure
layout,
it all.
which, that,
We'll have him address it at the next meeting.
Councilman Ellis.
First, I want to thank the citizens for showing up tonight. I do appreciate the input. It was very helpful. I do like the term "no man is an island." We are all here in Fremont. We all need to live together. I'm a businessman and I know what business is all about, but I'm also a family owner and I've chosen Fremont to be my place to live. I've experienced in the last 17 years a lot of flooding in Fremont, and I don't believe I want to be responsible for adding more to the problem. I believe there's a solution here, and I think it needs to be looked at in many different ways. But It kind of scared me when our consultant said, this is a micro study, not a macro. And we need to be looking at a macro. We need to be looking at what else is feeding into that. There's been a lot of changes to the west of this development. And so I really think that, you know, we as a council are responsible for the citizens of Fremont and are responsible for the quality of life. So I think it's important for us to understand that business is important. There's a solution here, but we as a council voted for $2 million airport terminal. Why can't we come up with a solution that's going to solve this problem and not just ignore it? And so that's what I'm looking for here tonight, is the unintended consequences of us just pushing this down the kicking the can down the street. We need to stop, do some major looking at of the drainage in this area, come up with a solution, and then we can put the gas pedal forward and go forward. So I would encourage the council to, in the coming agenda items, we're going to have some discussion, but we should be able to find the money to do this problem and do it solve the problem the right way. And whether it's making the retentions larger, cleaning out the ditches better, there's got to be a better way to solve this problem so that our businesses can move forward, but also that our citizens can live in freedom of not having to worry about drainage.
Councilman Yerger.
Do you start the clock at 3 minutes
What's that?
or 5 minutes? Thank you. I wanted to just add a couple of things to the comments that I made earlier. I'm one of those that likes to rely on city code. In section 11-316-03 with regarding to amendments to the UDC, criteria for amendments. And point out number 3, we will maintain or advance the public health, safety, or general welfare as the criteria for making amendments. We will help mitigate adverse impacts of the use and development of land, and in particular, stormwater management. Those are in our guiding principles and how we make amendments here. And I think that there are some vagaries with regards to the statistical evaluations that we probably need to talk with some of our developers on. But most importantly, I don't think that the study that we've been talking about tonight appears to be even close to being adequate in recognizing the impacts in the subdivision or the business park itself, and or recognizing all of the changes that went on to the west and the residential developments that are there to the south, all of which are feeding into the Rawhide. And we need to make sure that that study was comprehensive as to what is not just in the business park, but what is coming there that wasn't coming there when the original study was done, if that hasn't been adequately accounted for. And I don't feel at this juncture, based on what I'm hearing from everyone in the audience, that that has been. And that gives me great pause to advance this yet. I'd like to get to the same point that Councilman Ellis is at. You know, the business park needs to develop and we need to retain our businesses in Fremont, but we do need to do it the right way. And we do need to protect the public. We obviously didn't protect the Hasselbrooks when that was developed down there, and they've been flooding ever since, and Albee Towing just as bad. And they're behind the scenes, you know, on the back end of the problem. We have an opportunity to be on the front end of the problem this time, and we need to get there. And for those reasons, I don't think we should be entertaining a change in the FAR while we can chase down the calculation differences and make sure that we understand that. But most importantly, we need to delay this until we actually have a drainage study that is it macro, not my, whatever, of major consideration, rather than one that was modified from what we had that didn't take into account necessarily all the changes that are necessary. And we've been hearing about these all night. I am particularly disturbed by the pictures that I see about the flooding that already exists in that subdivision. And any increase in water flow doesn't have to be a 100-year storm, just the rapid amount of flow. If we increase the flow rates, that's going to create more problems for that subdivision, and they don't need them. And we have a chance to look at that now. And we need to make sure that the study does that. And we didn't have enough questions about that tonight. And I actually would like to make a motion that we table this item to change this code until we actually have a complete and thorough drainage study and a complete review of this to ensure that we have maintained the integrity of the subdivision that already exists there in Fremont. That's got to be one of our primary concerns. Yes, we need to promote the businesses, and I'm all for that. And we have some good businesses going out there. But they can also buy the adequate amount of ground necessary for what they need to build. Or perhaps this isn't the area that they want to be in ultimately for the size that they need for their business. We shouldn't be retailoring the size to make it fit for a particular business, just like I did in my example when I said I wanted to build a 7,000 square foot house, but an acre of ground didn't give me enough space to do that. So will the city please make an exception in the residential zoning code so that I can? And the answer is going to be no, we're not going to do that. Well, we need to look for solutions for these problems without tearing up the code and saying we're going to make it across the board everywhere we go. This is the new code for the entire Fremont. And so I have that motion on the table. I think we should table till we have a new drainage study and a complete one, not a regurgitation of the one that we had from 8 years ago. So that's my motion.
There's a motion to table. It's a privileged motion. Is there a second? Councilman Ellis,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-2.
All right, time is 8:40. Take a 10-minute break.
Good job. All right. Yeah, thank you.
fees accordingly. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Shane Weimer, Assistant City Administrator on the city side. As you see, or in your packet, you have the master fee schedule. This is an annual review. We've been doing this for several years now. What I do is I go out and I speak to each department head. We talk about the fees that we are charging through the city to help curb the cost of what the city is incurring and put that cost back on the individual that's causing the cost towards the city. As I go through with each department head, they make changes. Sometimes they delete lines that are no longer needed, and other times we raise some costs that are problematic or that are used quite often by the public. So with that being said, if you have any questions, I'll certainly take questions for the master fee.
Questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
I only have a couple. Some of these were fairly significant increases, so I flagged a few of them, and I thought maybe in your discussions with groups, you could enlighten us as to what may have prompted some of this. Some of it, I suppose,
Yep,
it's going to
absolutely.
be renovations, but so auditorium weekend fees Friday and Sunday went from $375 to $500 a day, and the weekdays are only $300. So
If you give me the page number on that.
oh, let's see. Thank you. Three.
Yeah, that's Parks and Rec, and I'll have H. Schwanke, our Interpark Director. He can come
Maybe
on.
let me just cover my list and then you can
Okay,
line
go
up
ahead.
your people if you can't deal with them. So I had a question about the auditorium, had similar questions about Christensen Field. I had questions about all the library fine fees were removed. The library's copying for black and white is different than the entire city. And I think last time when we went through the fee schedule, or maybe a couple issues ago, we talked about why that is, but I thought I'd just get refreshed as to why it's 25 cents everywhere else except the library, maybe good cause. And then I'm interested in knowing at the airport, the 45 by 21 monthly hangar is 945 square feet, and the other one, 56 by 16, is 896 square feet, yet the rental rates are twice as much for one as the other. And I'm interested in understanding, well, why aren't they paying the same amount per square foot?
Yeah.
So those are my questions.
So if I'll take those one at a time, and I'll just talk about the airport hangar. This is a Dave Goddican one, and obviously he's not here. And what I can tell you is that the difference in those fees, and maybe Brian can speak to these, is one hangar has power or electricity to it. The other one is less desirable, or it doesn't have as much amenities to it. Is that correct, Brian? In reference to that. And then I'll talk real quick about the history on the copies for the library. Originally, when we started the master fee, I wanted to make it just across the board 25 cents for all copies throughout the city, which made sense to me. But our library director at that time made a pitch to the city council, and it made sense to me that people that are coming to use the library computers and the services of the library might not necessarily have the funds available to them. So we wanted to make it easier for them to be able to print out their income taxes and the things that they need. So it was agreed upon by the council and staff that they stated 10 cents. I had considered moving that up this year, but Laura and I spoke about it and we decided to leave it at 10 cents. And I'll let Laura go ahead and talk about the removal of library fines and fees.
And your recollection about the copying was my recollection as well, but I just wanted to make sure that hadn't changed. So.
Yeah. So I'll actually bring up Laura sitting closest to me, so we'll go ahead and let her talk about the library first.
Thank you, Shane. Laura England Biggs, Interim Library Director. Another reason behind the copy difference, I think, may be the fact that our printing is mostly self-service. The rest of the city, there's usually staff time involved in creating that printing. And there's some recouping of that cost. Not a lot, 15 cents difference. I thought that might be one other reason that distinction was made in the past. As far as removing library fines, it's a movement that is gaining momentum across not just the country, but in fact across the world, to remove a barrier to access for low-income individuals. You would think by removing fines, we would never get our materials back. The studies have shown the opposite is true. More materials come back because people are no longer afraid of that 50 cent or $1 fine that they owe because they were a few days late. They get the books back. That's the important part. For the past 4 years, we've had less than $5,000 income under the fines. And in $1 million budget, that's pretty negligible. It's also cost us anywhere from 8 to 20% of that cost to send out overdue notices. Not a good return on the investment. It has gone down a lot since we started sending out notices by email, but we still send out postal notices. And if we can reduce the fines, then that will make things a lot easier on us. Saves staff time, saves paper for printing, et cetera, and postage.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Nate Schwanke, Interim Parks and Recreation Director. So I know that the first one that you'd mentioned was the auditorium, and you kind of alluded to it. This is just due to the renovation. We did a study and kind of looked around to other communities in our area with similar spaces, and then other communities that are similar size to Fremont and what they charge for their spaces. And that's what the changes on the fee schedule kind of reflect is we wanted to be affordable for Fremont yet competitive with other communities and other spaces. As far as Christensen Field goes, with the updates to the auditorium fees, we wanted to reflect that because Christensen Field still is the bigger event space. I wanted to make sure that it was still, people had to pay for that space as well. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Nate.
Councilman Yeager, did we catch everything or was there something I missed?
I just had one other question because I didn't give it to you. So as I look through the general list, there are some fees in here related to animals, pets and the like. My question was, now that we've gone down this road of putting CSOs into the police department, are we going to be wanting to include any kinds of fees associated with the city's recoupment of costs associated with our taking over animal control, other than the fines that are issued or the tickets that are issued that I assume go to court and they keep the money or we get it back some other way? Are we going to have any direct charging of any CSO related animal control fees? And if so, I didn't find them in here.
No, we shouldn't have any direct findings or fines related to the CSOs that are not already city ordinances. If it's obviously a city ordinance and it's a violation, then it goes to the courts. And I don't know if Jody's on. I don't know if we receive monies from the courts in reference city ordinances. Something I certainly should look into. But when it's under a city ordinance versus a state statute, I believe that the city should be receiving those fees.
Well, my recollection of the contract with Forever Home is that once the animals are turned over to them, any fees that are collected or whatever while they're in facility over there, they keep all of that money. So my question was, dangerous dog. I think we have some things in our city code that talk about dangerous dog. Well, certainly they're going to quarantine if they pick them up or whatever, but if we have citations issued and you have special requirements to contain dangerous dogs and you don't, is there a city fine? I think there is one maybe for that.
There
so
is.
It just triggered me, well, maybe there's going to be other ones. Maybe they don't exist today, but I didn't know whether or not I should expect to see anything here or in the future. We might see something now that we're in the animal control business.
I would say, and I'm speculating here, but I would say that if there is a citation issued and reference a dangerous dog, there's going to be some kind of prosecution. And that money would end up going to the courts. And again, if Jody could respond if she knows, do we get that money back from the courts?
But it wouldn't be in our fee schedule. It
It
just
would not
goes
be
to
in
the
our fee
court. They set the fines.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. Any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. My comment had to do with the 25% increase at the Ronan Pool on your fees. I was surprised by that. It doesn't seem like much when you go from $4 to $5, but it's quite a bit. And that neighborhood is a very busy pool. It supports the kids from that specific neighborhood area. That's a huge jump. And there are families with more than one child, and that could be cost prohibitive. You've increased those rates. And a comment was made, and I appreciated it by Shane, that you're trying to recoup some of the city costs. But you are all familiar with that this is a budget neutral item. This isn't something you're going to ever break even on. This is a service that the city supplies to the public for young and old. This is a neighborhood pool and it's needed. It keeps a lot of little rugrats. And my kids were included in those rugrats over the years in another town off the streets during the summer when mom and dad work. And it's an activity that's provided by the city. You're never going to break even. You're going to forever see red. There's always going to be issues and things to fix at the pools, and there's going to be manpower issues, et cetera. But this is part of what the tax dollars go to from all of the citizens, including myself. I really would like to see you rethink at least the pool fees and look at the affordability. You're increasing Ronan by 25% at the worst time possible. This COVID crisis has cost families dearly. Those restaurant server jobs and other jobs that they had and availed have been eliminated, or they've been decreased in hours. You know that as well as I do, how that has had the impact. And then you take a look at what you're charging now for going to the splash station. Rather than being a treat at the end of the week or once a month for some families, it's not going to occur. You're increasing that 16%, $7 to let your kids go enjoy a few hours at the splash station. And 5 and under will be free at Ronan. 4 and under will be free at Splash Station. Why the disparity? I would like to see you take a good hard look at those costs. It may not seem much out of your pocket, but if you're the one with 4 boys who want to go at the same time and want to go to the splash station, it would not have been affordable. Having been that welfare mom at one time, reliant on food stamps, there's no way I could have afforded to take the kids. So just take a good look at where this neighborhood pool is at. And that 25% increase is huge when it comes to a family. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Ellis?
I would have to agree with the citizen that just spoke. I think that we probably ought to try to keep those costs level, just where the community's been the last year. And I think anything we can do to just help a little. I mean, this is an extremely small amount, but if there's anything that we can do, and like Susan said, this is not, they're not going to make the city any money. This is simply, so I would like to amend the chart here so that any daily admission would go back to the original fee.
Councilman Jensen?
I agree, and I'll second that.
Everybody clear on the amendment? All right, cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
I would take then a motion in regards to amended resolution 2021-055 to approve the master fee schedule. Councilman Coons.
Make a motion to approve the amended resolution 2021-055.
Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 18, resolution 2021-056, amending resolution 2021-015 to change the local option economic development loan recipient to Vertical Cold Storage LLC and VCS Fremont Property 1 LLC from Compound Holdings LLC and New Horizons Storage Cold Storage LLC. It's a lot of LLCs in there. All right. We'll have staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Lottie Mitchell, Plan Administrator for the LB 840 Fund. Yes, a lot of LLCs here tonight. So what is before you is a request from the owners of those companies. They came to us in January as Compound Holdings and New Horizons Cold Storage. And at that meeting, when we awarded the $500,000 of LB 840 award to them, they mentioned that they had been approached by an investor and that they could possibly have a name change and possibly have some changes to their project. And so that has all come to fruition. And so that's the request before us tonight, is to change the LB 840 award from Compound Holdings and New Horizons Cold Storage to Vertical Cold Storage LLC and VCS Fremont Property 1 LLC. Included in the staff report is the structure. And so we're including the company name that is the operating company that's responsible for writing the paychecks and creating the jobs, as well as including the company that owns the property so that we have some asset. They're the ones that have the assets. So that's why we're including the two property names. It's the same setup as we previously had under Compound and New Horizons, but now it's Vertical Cold Storage and VCS Fremont Property 1. The forgivable requirements of their LB 840 award do not change. And actually they've met some of their requirements already. One of the requirements was to be annexed into the property within 12 months. That has been completed. That was came before the body here. Also, it's the LB 840 award would have been void if the sale of the property had not closed prior to January 1. We got word today, they closed yesterday officially. So that is checked off the to-do list. So we're moving ahead and the rest of the terms remain unchanged. And so tonight we're just requesting amendment to change the name.
Thank you, Lottie. Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, that was just all I was going to say. Just for clarity, the only thing we're doing here is just changing the names and everything else remains the same, right?
Correct. Yes.
Any questions for staff? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem.
I move that we amend resolution 2021-015 to reflect new company name Vertical Cold Storage LLC and VCH Fremont Property 1 LLC.
Councilman Yerger.
2156, which I think Sally just read.
All right. There's a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 19, resolution 2021-057, authorizing an agreement with Honeywell for high performance process manager HPM to enhanced high performance process manager EHPM migration at the Lundy Wright Power Plant. We'll have staff report. Go ahead, Jeff.
Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Lundy Wright Power Plant Manager. This is for the, like you mentioned, the migration of HPMs that are going to be obsolete to EHPMs. And during that, it will change out the entire system from a LCN UCN system to an Ethernet system. So I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Jeff? Councilman Ligban.
Is this a budgeted item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? There's none. I would take a motion in regards to resolution 2021-057. Councilman Gibson,
Make that resolution 2021-057.
motion by Gibson, Councilman Coons,
I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 20, utility bond refunding. The item A, resolution 2021-058, direction for call series 2014-B combined utility revenue bonds. This time we'll have staff report. Go ahead, Jody. Jody, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think Brian changed my role, and so all of a sudden it showed that I was restarting. So I apologize. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and members of council. Jody Sanders, Director of Finance. We have an opportunity tonight to spend some money, to save some money. It's a kind of a three-pronged process where we would call some existing bonds that have already been issued, and then through another issuing of bonds, reissue them basically at a lower rate. I'm going to turn it over. We have Scott. I've just drawn a blank. Scott Keen, sorry, Scott. Scott Keen on the line to help us to kind of step through what he's kind of give it to you in more of a bullet point fashion, if you will.
Thank you, Jody. Can you hear me okay? Terrific.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Scott Keen with Piper Sandler. As Jody mentioned, we are proposing an ordinance that would allow for the refinancing of the Series 2014 B bonds, currently outstanding in the amount of just over $29 million with an average rate of about 4.5%. The final maturity of those bonds is July of 2034. We're not proposing to extend the amortization of those bonds. We're looking at restructuring and issuing new bonds with the same amortization, just level annual savings. So just lowering our principal and interest costs every year over the remaining life of those bonds. At today's interest rates, the savings are a little over $500,000 per year. And as we've talked in the past, when we do these refundings, we look at the savings not in each year, but what they are over the life of the issue, discounted into today's dollars. We consider that we call that a present value analysis. These bonds have present value savings of between $5.5 and $6 million. And by convention, we then take that present value savings amount and divide it by the outstanding par amount of bonds. And the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, recommends that an issuer target at least a minimum level of savings of 3 to 5%. And we're close to 20% right now with this refunding at today's interest rates. So it's a very, very favorable refunding, a terrific opportunity. And this is just the first of two issues that we're talking about. The ordinance, you will note, provides for the issuance of up to $73 million of refunding bonds, because we're looking for this single ordinance to authorize the issuance of the refunding bonds for not only the 2014 Bs, but also the 2018 bonds. The 2014 B bonds will become callable this summer, which means that the city has the opportunity to issue tax-exempt current refunding bonds to refund these 2014 Bs. The Series 2018 bonds are not callable until 2023, so any refunding that would be issued right now would have to be done on a taxable basis. But there isn't a huge difference between those taxable and the tax-exempt rates. The ordinance that's in front of you, in addition to the parameter of a not to exceed amount of $73 million, also has a parameter of a true interest cost not to exceed 3.5%, and an underwriter's discount that we don't envision exceeding 0.75%. These bonds would be sold through a competitive sale, much the same way we sold the combined utility refunding bonds last summer. Our game plan is to try to get to market with this issue around the end of May, settle the bond issue the middle of June, and pay off the existing 2014 B bonds on their first call date, July 29, 2021. So that's the quick summary of the refunding of the 2014 B bonds. Jody, if you don't mind, if you can scroll to the summary of the 2018, of the refunding of the 2018 bonds. Those bonds are outstanding in the amount currently of $37.7 million. They have an average rate of just under 4%. And we would look to be replacing those bonds with current bonds at current interest rates ranging between 2.35 and 2.6%. Again, we're not looking to extend the amortization, just looking to structure the debt to provide for level annual savings that currently are estimated at about $150,000 per year, which results in present value savings of $1.3 to $2.3 million, which translates into about 3.5 to 6% based on current interest rates or conservative estimate of interest rates of the outstanding bonds. So again, meets that GFOA targeted level of savings. We have the same parameters, $73 million, 3.5%, 0.75, and the same timeline. We would look to actually, if market conditions hold, if we were to sell both issues, we'd look to be selling them on the same day, trying to lock in both the tax exempt financing and the taxable financing on the same day to take advantage again of great demand that's out in the marketplace right now for both tax exempt and taxable bonds. One caveat that I would make about this refunding of the 2018 bonds, Congress is in the midst of obviously a lot of discussions on an infrastructure plan, on an additional COVID relief plan, both of which have had legislators talking about adding back the provision that would allow for advance refundings like this issue that we're talking about to be done on a tax exempt basis rather than a taxable basis. That change was made as part of the 2017 Tax Act, and Congress, both sides of the aisle, are talking about removing that, but we just don't know if it will happen. Because it's been wrapped up with the infrastructure bill, there's a bit more uncertainty about it than maybe would otherwise be the case. So that's a very quick summary of both of these refundings. Clearly the refinancing of the 2014 B bonds that provides a little over $500,000 of savings is very, very strong, very large percentage. The refinancing of the 2018 bonds, not quite as strong, but still very favorable dollar amount of savings. I would expect that we would be targeting a minimum level of savings of probably something like 5%. So if interest rates hold where they are right now, we would meet that target. If interest rates would rise, we might not meet that one and would just pull that issue out and not proceed with it. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councilman Yerger.
That was quite thorough, so I'm not sure that I have specific questions with regards to trying to save some money.
Okay.
But I do have a question with regards to the resolutions themselves and the acknowledgement receipt form. I assume, Tyler, you're going to be after us before we leave the meeting to fill this out, correct? Okay. And the other comment that I have with regards to authorization, and it's in 2021-058, and it's also in 2021-059 in subsection 3, because they're both identical wording. It lists the various parties for the city that may at any time after the date direct the irrevocable call of the bonds. And I guess from my perspective, I'm suggesting that approval ought to come from any two individuals that are named here rather than a single individual. Typically, when we're dispersing funds, legal, we have two people on our accounts doing acknowledgement. Seems appropriate. We might want two acknowledgements here. This is a significant item. Doesn't seem to be too onerous for us to get that. So I'm wondering if we couldn't just insert in section 3, any two of the mayor, the city council clerk, director, finance, whatever, are authorized to do this.
Scott, did you hear that? Is that okay?
I'm sorry. Yes, I was wanting to know if you were going to jump in. I don't see that being as problematic at all. That section is handled through what's called a direction for call, which is just a one-page sheet that the bond attorney drafts up that gives specific direction to the paying agent to call those bonds. That direction for call is not executed until after the successful sale of the refunding bonds. But it'd be a very easy thing to have two names or two signature lines on that direction for call, which would accomplish exactly what the councilman's suggesting. Not a problem.
So
Yeah.
tonight, sorry.
I don't have a problem with that either.
So tonight you'll still have to sign though, because time is of the essence on.
I
these.
understand.
Okay, so we'll
As
have to
long as we
sign,
can, as long as
sign.
we can get that inserted into the resolution section 3, and it sounds like we can, and do the signatures that we need to, having approved the resolution with that amendment, we'd be fine.
Okay.
And I'll make that amendment if we need to do it
Yeah,
formally.
and
here
then I
so
want to
we can
remind
get
you,
in.
so there's two resolutions, one for the 14, one for the 18, and then there's an ordinance, and we're asking that you waive the readings and pass that on one reading tonight so we can get moving forward on these refunds.
The ordinance refers to the resolutions.
There's
Item C is the ordinance,
there's two
basically.
resolutions,
So the
yeah.
first two, A and B, call the bonds.
I didn't
C-
catch it. I didn't catch it if the ordinance has the same.
I don't think so.
I
Does
didn't see it.
Scott?
I think it's just the resolution.
I think it's just a resolution. I don't think
Okay,
it's. Scott-
so it'd be good to fix that then.
Yeah.
So I make that motion.
Okay. So just to my understanding, so each resolution will have to make that amendment, correct? Okay. So there's a motion to amend the resolution 2021-058 to include two people signing.
Two approvers.
Two
yep.
approvers. Authorized officers, okay. Councilman Jensen,
I will make that second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now I take a motion to the amended resolution 2021-058. Councilman Yerger,
Make a motion to approve resolution 2021-058. Amended as amended.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second,
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We're at item B, resolution 2021-059, direction for call series 2018 combined utility revenue bonds. Is there any comment from council? If none, I would take a motion to amend this as well with the two authorized officers. Councilman Yerger,
I make the motion to amend two approvals of two officers.
Councilman Legman,
I'll second that.
cast your votes for the amendment.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now I take a motion to the amended resolution 2021-059. Councilman Jensen,
I'll make a motion to approve amended resolution 2021-059.
Councilman Ligman,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item C, ordinance 5568 to authorize issuance of combined utilities revenue refunding bonds series 2021. This would be to introduce and hold first reading. There is a request to suspend rules and hold final reading. Is there any additional comments from Jody or Scott?
None here. Thank you.
Nope.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? I would take a motion to introduce and hold first reading. Councilman Gibson,
I will make that motion.
Councilman Legband,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have first reading.
An ordinance authorizing the issuance of combined utilities revenue bond series 2001, 2021 of the city of Fremont, Nebraska in one or more series in the aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $73 million for the purpose of refunding and defeasing certain outstanding bonds of the city, directing the application of the proceeds of said bonds, prescribing the form, terms, and details of said bonds, pledging and hypothecating the revenue and earnings of the combined electric system, water system, sewer system, gas system of said city for the payment of said bonds and the interest thereon, providing for collection, segregation, and application of the revenues of said systems, providing for the sale of bonds, appointing a paying agent, authorizing the mayor or a designee to award the sale of the bonds to the bidder, providing the most favorable bid to the city at a public sale, authorizing the delivery of bonds to the purchaser, approving post-issuance compliance procedures, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form on first reading.
Now I take a motion to suspend rules and hold final reading. Councilman Legband,
I will make the motion to suspend the rules and hold final reading.
Councilman Jensen,
I will second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance authorizing the issuance of combined utilities revenue refunding bond series 2021 of the city of Fremont, Nebraska in one or more series in an aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $73 million for the purpose of refunding and defeasing certain outstanding bonds of the city, directing the application of the proceeds of said bonds, prescribing the form, terms, and details of said bonds, pledging and hypothecating the revenue and earnings of the combined electric system, water system, sewer system, and gas system of said city for the payment of said bonds and the interest thereon, providing for collection, segregation, and application of the revenues of said systems, providing for the sale of the bonds, appointing a paying agent, authorizing the mayor or designee to award the sale of the bonds to the bidder, providing the most favorable bid to the city at a public sale, authorizing the delivery of the bonds to the purchaser, approving post-issuance compliance procedures, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form on final reading.
Thank you, Tyler. Cast your final vote.
The vote is 8-0. The ordinance is approved.
Thank you, Jody and Scott.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Item 21, Councilmember Yerger item, receipt and discussion of the March DCHS sheltering and animal control report. We'll have a report from Councilman Yerger.
I really don't have anything to report. I just wanted to have this document entered into the public record as they used to be. For a number of years, they were entered in by the police department, but at this juncture, they haven't been automatically put in the council record. So I'm entering these in the public record. And obviously, this would give the public an opportunity to speak to them should they want to, while we put these things into the record each month. So that's all I'm doing, putting it in the record.
Councilman Gibson.
I have a comment. Do we have a report?
Is that a motion, Councilman Yerger?
Well, it's already in the packet. You just asked me for my report. It's in the packet. I assume that's in the public record already, so we don't really need to act on it.
Is there any-
Unless you want to officially receive it, we can do that.
If there's no other discussion from council, we can move on to the next item.
And that's my item as well.
ahead.
And that's the report from Forever Home, just like the DCSH report. Also putting that into the public record, offering an opportunity for the public on a regular basis to speak to those reports if they choose to. So I don't know if anybody's here tonight wants to, but I'm just putting it in the public record.
Any council discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 23. This is a council member Ellis item, discussion of the CARES Act funding the city has and or may yet receive and the potential uses, restrictions associated with that funding. Go ahead, Councilman Ellis.
Just wanted to bring this to the table tonight for discussion, and maybe Jody can pipe in here a little bit. The city has been a recipient of some CARES Act funds that were dated back in December of last year. As many of you know, many municipalities, cities, and counties received this funds. Even businesses received the CARES Act funds. Most of it was in replacement of expenses. And I believe Jody made the comment in the email she sent out to us that was used for police and fire payroll, which in return frees up that money that the city had set aside for the fire and payroll. And so what really caused this to come to light was I read an article that Norfolk was using their CARES Act funds to increase or escalate their 1 and 6 year road plan. So they actually brought it back, their 1 and 6 year road plan, brought it back to the city council and chose several projects that they could use their CARES funds that they had received to help with escalating some of those projects. And so that's just one idea. I just wanted to bring this to the table tonight to decide or to discuss, you know, how us as a city might be willing to use this. And I do know that part of the 1.9 trillion, there's been some estimate that's the next round of funding from the federal government that we're going to be in a recipient. I think Jody said an estimated 4.4 million. That's purely estimated just based on city population. And that might hit the city sometime half this year or whatever. And so I think us as a city council just need to put some thought into this as far as, you know, where do we think we could use these funds to help our citizens the best that we can. So open for discussion.
Thank you.
Before we have Jody speak, I want to clear up something. First of all, the CARES Act money is very specific, and Jody can speak to that. It was only for reimbursement of police, fire, and dispatch salaries. So in Norfolk's case, I called them, you cannot use the COVID money for streets. So what they did is they knew for a fact that they were going to get a little over $1 million in CARES money and the CARES Act money. And so they assumed that $1 million would be in surplus then at the end of their year. Okay. So they were very careful to say they're taking money out of surplus, that reserves for those projects. Okay. And what we're suggesting is that Jody used the money for exactly the proper process, the COVID money. Okay. We can't use it for anything else. And that when you start talking about budget later this year, okay, we net out this 1.6 million. Now, remember, we lost 800,000 from state aid. So you only got 800,000 left. But when we net it out, you may have a discussion then during budget. Is there a particular project you would like to get done with the reserve money that now has been offset from the use of half of the COVID money? Does that make sense? And so just make sure we're not talking about COVID money. We can't, because there's very specific things that we can spend that on. As far as the new money coming, so far, there's only 4 purposes under the law that can be used, that money can be used for. And that is to response to a public health emergency or negative economic consequences. We have a few negative economic consequences. I think I reported on the occupancy taxes. There's a couple of like Kinos, there's a couple of funds that we had a negative impact. So we might be able to use some money to restore those funds to its prior year collection. 2, provision of premium pay to eligible workers. We didn't have any premium pay. Revenue replacement relative to 2019. Again, we really didn't have any revenue decline. And then the last one, investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So that today looks like where we probably would spend the $4.5 million. If it does in fact end up being that, but we're still waiting for the guidance from the Treasury Department Back when Jody reported that we had 1.4 million, and that was before they added dispatch, we only knew that it was going to be fire and police. Jody reported back in January that we received 1.4. Then they later issued a CFR on January 15th. So when Jody put in a report, I think on January 12th, later, just a few days later on the Code of Federal Regulations, they posted the guidance for those funds. Then they included dispatch, and that's why I went from 1.4 to 1.6. And so we're waiting for Treasury to also write the guidance rules for this new American Relief Act, the money that 4.5, and then we'll figure out, is there something we can do? But I think the appropriate time to discuss that is when budget comes up, when we start talking about projects and what we want to do, because this next tranche is going to be a significant tranche of money. So Jody, do you want to add to what I said there?
I'm not sure what else I could add, Brian. You've pretty well covered most of it. You know, I did report to the council in January that we received those funds. And so I was anticipating, and, you know, I've checked in with a couple of our sister cities. Norfolk perhaps had a project that they needed to have done quickly. Most other communities are doing what we're doing, which is waiting to see how this year shakes out before making plans to spend it on a project. We had already budgeted to use fund balance this year, if you recall, to provide that property tax relief. So, you know, we know we'll have a deficit at the end of the year, or excuse me, it'll be just basically less of a deficit. But I think it is prudent to wait till we get to estimates for year end and then move forward with the budget and develop our projects based more on need rather than, hey, we got some money, let's go spend it.
Any discussion, Councilman Ellis?
I'd say that I would believe the 1 and 6 is definitely need. That's not a want. That's something we think we've all agreed upon, that the 1 and 6 year street plan is a need. And I did understand, and I've misstepped. I'm sorry if I stated that the CARES Act, it is not the CARES Act funds we would be using, but the benefit of them that would be used. And so I probably crossed the line there. So hopefully I didn't get myself into trouble. But it's just something for us to be on the back of our minds. I think we need to be looking at possible ways of the budget years coming up. And so I think just something to be thinking about.
Councilman Yerger?
So thank you for the clarity about going from 1.4 to 1.6, because I didn't understand how we got there. So that was quite helpful. Also, I'm interested. So Jody, with regards to dispersing $1.5 million or so across police, fire, and dispatch during the course of, since we received them funds in December, how long does it take the city to actually disperse those funds? You're just basically paying payroll with those funds instead of regular general funds. They're all in the same pool, I assume. You just put the money in general fund?
You're muted, Jody.
Sorry, the funds were received in December of 2020, which is in the 2021 fiscal year, but they were for payroll that was incurred in 2020. I believe it was March through maybe July. I could be wrong about the timing. And we had to go through and provide the state with the amount of payroll that we paid during that period. And then they reimbursed us based on that. And so as we applied those funds, you'll see in the reports that you get that you know, our contributions or rather intergovernmental will show that 1.6 million. Well, excuse me, it'll show 1.4 million going into the general fund, because the amount that was for dispatch expenses, the 911 center, all of Shelley's expenses are automatically shared with the county, 65-35. The city pays 65, the county pays 35. So that piece will just go back into the communication center fund, Fund 33. The general fund is the recipient of the 1.4, and those will go back toward showing his revenue in the police department and the fire department.
Okay, and I didn't have time after Councilman Ellis put this on the agenda, so I was hastily trying to look through your reports, trying to find, well, where do I see those monies, in which fund are they, and which funds are they coming out of? And I didn't find them with the cursory work that I did. And maybe it would be helpful on a going forward basis as a part of what you tell us, either in your summary report or whatever, where those funds are going and how they're coming out. Because these are unusual government funds, not typical from operations. Might be helpful just to highlight that for us. Now, if that's not asking too much.
Sure.
And one thing about it too, Jody, sorry, this will throw us under the Single Audit Act again, right? Because of the receipt of federal funds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so again.
Because
you
they
can
weren't-
expect the
they
audit
weren't
to have
committed
that same
funds.
question Because we are now under Single Audit Act requirements.
Any other discussion from council? If there isn't, I'd take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Legman,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Councilman Jensen,
I will second.
cast your votes to adjourn.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.
Hey, don't forget, you guys.
Don't leave until you see Tyler.